Welcome, everybody, to the 2+2 Pokercast presented by RunItOnce.com. Pokercast, 4:38, November 16th, 2016. Here I am in my humble abode alongside Mr. Roscoe P. Coltrane.
Hello, boys and girls.
And on the phone with Mr. Terrence Chan in Hong Kong. T, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and as people on the PokerCast forum from the show thread last week pointed out, I should be hereby referred to as Terrence the Snow Dragon.
Snow Dragon is awesome. Whoever came up with that name, it's perfect. Snow Dragon, love it.
That was pretty good. I'm looking at the thread real quick. Kokiri, frequent poster, of course, to our forum, awesome. So yeah, Snow Dragon. That's me for this week, and it is warm here in the city of Hong Kong. Doing it real quick, it is it is 26 degrees today, and it's like cloudy out there.
Oh, I'd like to amend. I think snowbird was a Canadian term a term for Canadians who went to the U.S. when it got snowy up here in Canada. They go spend 6 months in Arizona. It doesn't snow really here anymore. Global warming and all. Where it might be rain dragon. How about rain dragon or cold dragon?
The rain dragon really doesn't have the ring to it.
Doesn't sound like as good as snow dragon.
It's the cloud dragon, no, not really.
Stormy dragon.
Vancouver's not the best. It would be better if I were originally from Winnipeg or something like that, but not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Today we got a fun show. We got a bunch of stuff to get to. In case you missed, it's full. Our mailbag is full. We're going to power through all the emails we haven't got to, clear out the email inbox so we can read some new ones next week that you send in to pokercast@2plus2.com. Send your questions, jokes, observations. Send them all in. We'll read them on the air. First, I want to, off the top, say thank you so much to everybody who I received an outpouring of support last week for my family situation. I love everybody who took their time out of their day to post in the thread on Twitter. I've got emails. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. A little bit of good news quickly, and I won't keep doing this every week, but since we talked about it last week, my wife went to an oncologist this week, and we are now getting back on this chemo drug. She's going to be on it for life, so that's a bit of a downside, but it's going to shrink all the little tumors that have come back, and our oncologist said it wasn't life-threatening by any stretch, so we're very, very happy about that. Thanks again for all the support. T, did you... this is a dumb question, but last Saturday was fight night, UFC fight night. I'm not a huge fight fan, so I don't, end up watching these things. This one I watched, the McGregor fight, on YouTube later. And first of all, awesome fight. I can't believe how fast McGregor's hands are. We'll quickly talk about this because there's something I want to talk about in relation to this fight. But quickly, what a fight.
He is, just a phenomenal martial artist, evolving more and more like every single fight. Like his fluidity, his movement, his timing, his ability to make Eddie Alvarez, who frequently gets hurt but is famously tough and has never been knocked out before. He has this weird sort of it's almost like those mystical death touches from old martial arts movies where he touches you and guys are just in insane amounts of pain and they're hurt really badly, and it's tremendously precise. And regardless of what you might think of his personality or something like that, he's an amazing fighter, and it's pretty awesome to watch him work.
You know what it reminded me of? His style, his stand-up sort of style when he's on his feet. You know those old boxing photos where they've got those goofy, they're 1920 photos?
Oh, yeah.
And they're standing up.
Stance,
yeah, he looks like that, doesn't he?
Low. Yep, definitely. I think there's some influence of that. I think there's some Bruce Lee style influence too. With the really kind of wide stance, and you see
chest out.
He spins a lot, and there's definitely a lot. There's definitely a lot of traditional martial arts influence in his style for sure. So, but I mean, the cool thing is about the modern UFC is there's no shortage of challenges for him. There's you might have only watched the main event, but a couple fights earlier, Khabib Nurmagomedov went in there and did the thing and made his case to being the number one contender. He could easily beat Conor. There are some great fights on the horizon for Conor.
If he doesn't quit because he doesn't get ownership.
Yeah, that's true. That's cool. Good you pointed that out, Adam. Ross. I don't know if you saw this, Adam, but he's basically at the press conference demanding ownership in the company, or else he just might take his ball and go home.
That's awesome. That was the absolute GOAT interview with Joe Rogan in the ring after the fight. I howled my ass off. I'd like to apologize to absolutely fucking nobody. Go get my belt. Where's my other belt? Do something. This like,
oh my god,
it was so funny.
He's tripping.
I was laughing my head off. It was fantastic. Surrounding the McGregor fights this week, I saw this meme that was out on Twitter, and I want to read it because I read it to my son, and we neither of us watch MMA too much, but I explained to him who Conor McGregor was. But this quote he is attributed to him is fantastic, and he said, "There's no talent here. This is hard work. This is an obsession. Talent doesn't exist. We're all equals as human beings. You could be anybody if you put in the time. You'll reach the top, and that's that. I'm not talented. I'm obsessed." And I thought that was really neat. T, what did you think of that?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a tremendous, especially with the adrenaline running, a post-fight thing to say. I mean, talent exists. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But, I mean, I think a lot of people are talented, and it's the combination of the two that makes somebody as special as him. There's a lot of talented people out there, and there's a lot of hard workers out there. But when you get incredibly obsessed, incredibly hardworking people, then you get guys who sort of in this way transcend the sport and become like the elite 1% of 1% or 1% of the 0.01%. And that's him right now. And yeah, like, I mean, I think it's a myth to say that talent doesn't exist. There's certainly people who win the genetic lottery to some extent or another for whatever they do. But these people all work hard. I think, like, we think of this, even poker too, we think of guys like Phil Ivey who, are often thought to be natural talents in what they do, but they also put in tremendous work, especially, I think in the poker world, especially as people come up and especially as people, strive to stay on top in an ever difficult and changing poker environment, that it's not, talent definitely isn't enough, and hard work makes up that gap.
Yeah. I have a bit of an announcement. I got another traffic ticket. I got another speeding ticket, T.
We need Ross. We need this to be like a recurring segment. Like, we need a drop. Like, the same way that we intro the Ross report, or the same way that we intro 140 or less. Like the Adams traffic court things. You need to get on that, Ross.
I'll be going back Inferno Tilt. I'll be going back to court shortly after when I fight this one. But I was totally zoned out. I was doing 82. The weird thing is, I'm not 100% sure I was speeding. It was a 60 zone. I was behind a car.
I'll lay odds. I'm not 100%
yeah,
sure.
It's likely I was. But the way that guy had his gun, he showed me the gun. And the angle, I'm going to do a whole diagram for the court. This is going to be funny. I'm going to go there, take pictures, put them up on like an easel for the judge to look at and go, there's no way. Anyways, I got a whole plan for court that they're going to laugh at, I'm sure. But yeah.
Ross, can you periscope the court hearing? Is that allowed?
That would be good. Yeah, you can do that.
Potentially. I don't know if you're allowed to film in Canadian courtrooms, are you?
I think you are. Especially
because they always do like the artist rendition in the paper.
I thought that was just for like child molesters and stuff.
No, OJ was televised. That's why.
Yeah. Terrence, I had one of my kids' hockey team had a party this week. In a big sort of party room and tables and chairs, and one of the parents brought a deck of cards and chips. Clearly, they play tournaments with their friends all the time. This was a $20 buy-in, sort of 8-handed sit and go, and I had the decision to make: do I want to sit down and play in this thing or not?
Or you don't.
I don't. I certainly don't. But there was nothing. Like, all the parents were doing it. Like, all the parents that were there. So if I don't, I'm standing by myself against the wall, doing nothing. And if there was one other person who didn't want to, who would sit there and talk for 2 hours, I would have rather done that, clearly. But so my question to you, T, is do you get invited to these things? And what happens when you do? Like, oh, I don't want to play poker with you. You're a professional, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this literally happened at the gym on Friday, where
really?
People were saying, like, oh, I have a poker night. Yeah, with Terrence, we're having a poker night. You should come. And then, like, 4 other people were saying, no, he's not invited. And I was like, oh, don't worry. Like, we're on the same page. I don't want to play either. Like, yeah, like, what's the value in these, like, equivalent of 25-cent, 50-cent games where, like, you're going to play, like, 7 hands an hour and, like, the rules are just going to be made up as you go along. And if you win, you don't you can't really win. Jeez, and like if you lose, you're like, oh, I thought you were a professional.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a no-win situation. If you lose, oh, you're not so good. I can make a living playing poker. Look at you. You're out already with 6 big blind stacks. Or if you win, take money from your friends. You're going to win.
Yeah.
Like it's literally a no-win.
You're not good.
It's brutal. I hate those. I would rather do anything. Anyways,
you should just be like, oh, $20. Like, do they make tournaments that small? And then just say like, I've only got 1,000 on me. Is that okay?
Yeah. Can I keep rebuying? Yeah. Anyway, so what happened was I sit down and I end up playing this thing and whatever, explaining rules and doing that whole thing to some people who really didn't understand.
That's the other brutal part, is just being the floor man for like every single hand. It's the worst.
And so we're playing, and the guy directly to my right has got an iWatch on, and he's got the digital display is set to his heartbeat. So
what?
Yeah, so he's playing, and he uses his left. It's on his left wrist, and he's using his left hand to bet and raise with. And he sticks his hand out, and you look, and everybody's looking at his heartbeat on his wrist, and we're just laughing, like, dude, you probably should turn that off or something. It was funny.
That's fantastic. Well, the funny thing is, I think I've told this on the story before. I once played a heart rate monitor tournament. It was the World Cup of Poker. It was filmed in the UK. Trivia note: James Hartigan's first ever broadcast of a poker tournament.
Oh wow!
And so, like, I got to watch the film afterwards, right? So it's sort of it was a perfect natural experiment for me, because there are 2 pivotal pots I played in the first. Their heads up tournaments, and in the very first hand, I think I pick up like 9-10, and I flop the nut straight, and I check raise or something like that, and then I think like 4 hands later, I'm like an all-in bluff, and so the thing is that my heart rate goes up on both of them, which is not really that surprising, right? Like on the first one, I have the absolute nuts, and I want to get called, and the second one, like I'm praying not to get called. The bluff was, I think, maybe like 9 or 10 beats per minute higher than the all-in, like the value shove. But I mean, yeah, so obviously if I were wearing it on my wrist, then you would be able to tell. But like if you just said like Terrence has a really abnormally high heart rate right now, you wouldn't necessarily actually know which one was
right.
which.
How do you correlate that? Yeah.
You'd have to know my actual like baseline heart rate under both situations.
Which doesn't happen. Exactly. Quick shout out.
Unless you wear a heart rate monitor at the table, which we generally don't recommend.
It's not a good thing. Shout out to one of our listeners, Eric Bensamochin, who wrote in. We actually read his email on the show a few weeks back. He started a podcast called the Recreational Poker Players Podcast. Remember, he wrote in and asked if we could get a casual player's look at the World Series of Poker. He decided to, instead of just have a little spot here on our show, he started his own podcast. So check that out.
Boy, Eric.
Yeah,
I love it. And that's exactly, I think I remember saying that at the time.
That's exactly what he said, yeah.
Starting a podcast ain't that hard. This is the beauty of the internet world that we live in today.
No barriers to entry.
Like, there are no barriers to entry. You wanna be a writer, start a blog. Start writing, submit your shit. You want to be a podcaster, start a podcast, put it up on iTunes, go. Like this is a great world we live in. So hopefully Eric's podcast gets some traction, and check it out.
Sad note, rest in peace to Mr. Johnny Hughes. I don't know, T, how much you know about Johnny. He
saw that.
Was a poker historian, Texas road gambler from Lubbock, who played with all the Old West gamblers, Doyle, Sailor Roberts, all the guys. He had many stories. Was an interesting cat. He posted in NVG a lot, and so he got a lot of grief for sort of mixing fact with fiction. He was a writer, and it was sort of hard sometimes to tell what was real and what wasn't. And but he did definitely contribute some nice content to the poker world, and hope he does rest in peace. All right, so let's move on. We've got a new Shark Scope question. You ready for this one, Tia? I want to get your take. Maybe we shouldn't ask for your answer because it might influence people's answers. But here it is. If you played a regular 6-max sit and go on PokerStars, and you played 50 of them in a row, so 50 6-max sit and goes the regular variety, how many different players would you play against? So 60.
Is this at any given buy-in? I assume that you didn't state a buy-in, so it's just sort of across.
Yeah, I think it's across the platform. 56 max sit and goes, 300 players minus your minus your 50 is 250. 250 different players. So how many of the 250 would be repeats, the same people playing against? And head on over to
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah,
I ask about the buy-in, of course, because I think the higher the buy-in you go, then the more likelihood of repeats you're going to see, obviously, because the pool of $100 sit and go players is much smaller than the pool of $1 sit and go players. I would, I won't influence, but I would say that the answer is likely smaller than I think it is. If that makes sense.
Well,
it's
because
smaller than I would expect.
In your head, you're thinking about all the regs you play against at the higher levels. This is an average over all the different levels. So
if you think about the distribution of sit and goes, like if you're talking about all the sit and goes in existence, is going to be some kind of, I don't know what the average buy-in would be, but it's going to be obviously on the small side, and therefore it would be a larger overall player pool. But I could be wrong.
We'll see. SharkScope, the official SharkScope thread over at 2+2's podcast forum, the Pokercast forum. Head on over there, throw your answer in there, and again, a gold subscription worth over $300 will be given out to the winner, the guy who gets closest or guesses it exactly right. All right, let's move on. We're going to get into some in case you missed it.
How did he miss the open goal? 6 by 4, and he comes up 0. Oh, no! Oh, yes! He missed it! He's missed it! How on earth did he miss that?
In case you missed it, David Bazoff, the former CEO of Amaya, the gaming company that does own PokerStars.com, Full Tilts, other properties as well. He stepped down, you'll remember, months ago with the insider trading stuff that he was being investigated in Quebec. He's come back. He made an offer maybe about a year ago, I want to say, of $21 a share. He's now made an offer for $24 a share for the company Amaya. $3.5 billion would be worth. So we've had this situation. A couple of months ago, you'll remember William Hill. They were around kicking the tires on a takeover of Amaya, and they offered, I want to say it was $2.9 billion.
Many zeros.
And one of the biggest shareholders in William Hill said, this is a terrible deal for us. Amaya isn't even worth $1 billion. And now we have this offer from Bazoff that is $24 a share, $3.5 billion. In the news release, Bazoff said there are agreements to contribute $3.65 billion in equity from several equity funds, including Head and Shoulders Global Investment Fund. Is that the stupidest hedge fund name ever? Head and Shoulders Global. But
not if they're heavily staked in shampoo.
That's how they made all their money. It seems crazy. We've got huge differences in what presumably smart people think this company is worth. These people, William Hill, or the big shareholder, said, look, it's not even worth $1 billion. William Hill offered $2.9 billion. This is $3.65. Of course, it was sold. The Scheinbergs sold it to Amaya for $4.9 billion a couple of years ago. First of all, PokerStars going private again. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing, Terrence, do you think, from the public company it is now?
I mean, I think the horse has already left the barn on this one, in the sense that, like, if we were talking now with foresight or with hindsight rather about what was going on, back when the Scheinbergs decided to first sell the company to Amaya in the first place, and now we could sort of say, like, oh, what would be the best thing? Clearly, the best thing would be staying private. I mean, because but now I like I said, like, I don't know that going private again is necessarily the solution. They're not going to be able to get away with, like, operating in questionable markets and all of this kind of thing. Like, that's not something that, I mean, maybe it could, but I mean, I can't imagine, like, any sort of private owner taking it into like the U.S. market. I think that would just be insane at this point.
Right.
With respect to like the variance in valuations, I mean, I don't know that I'm not a finance guy, but I don't know that it's that disparate, as you seem to think it is, because I mean, like, we're not talking about a giant sample size of different individuals saying that they're worth anywhere from $1 billion to $4 billion. We're talking about just a small number of sort of key wealthy individuals
with their own interests, right?
Yeah, with their own interests, and who can have differing opinions. Yeah, I mean, like, but it strikes me as bizarre. And again, like, I'm coming from this from a point of view of somebody who doesn't, has no specialized knowledge in this area. Like, how does a guy who's like, potentially really involved in the insider trading regarding the original acquisition of the company still be talking about potentially buying that same company and taking it back private? Like, this is insane to me.
Or still being able to find somebody to give him $3.5 billion.
Right.
Considering he is under that stress that you talked about, the investigating for insider trading, and this isn't going to solve people who think, oh, it's a private company. I saw some, in the 2+2 thread, maybe that we'll get this movement back towards the players instead of the constant push to other verticals, poker players to other verticals, sports betting, casino, all the different things that they're trying to monetize their database. But they would still have this huge amount of money that they've got to service the debt on. So I mean, it doesn't seem to me like this is, something that could solve all the problems that we've seen with PokerStars over the last little while.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is sort of people grasping at hopes that of the old glory days. I don't think this is going to be what provides it.
Yeah, the PokerStars as we had grown up with, so to speak, in the industry seems to be gone.
It's all right. Broader and better things are on the horizon.
RunOnce.com.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, moving on, one more PokerStars note. Two more, actually. The PokerStars VIP Club sent out an email this week to their database providing some details on what's going to happen with their VIP program. Remember, they said they're going to disband it in 2017. It's going to be completely revamped. Supernova Elite is gone, and we're not even sure exactly what form it's going to take. So they're getting close, of course, to 2017, and they sent out an email saying remember, Supernova was a year-long status, and it's now going to be a month-to-month status because, of course, when they're going to give 2 months, they said, notice on when they're going to revamp and announce the changes to the program, but of course they can't offer an entire year Supernova if they're going to change the format going forward in 2017. So now it's a month-to-month status for Supernova. It's going to be 28% rakeback, maximum rakeback under the temporary system, and it's going to take 10,000 VPPs a month to keep that Supernova status, where before I think it was 8,000. So they're asking for more play to keep that Supernova status. And one of the other things that sort of bothered me that came out of this, first of all, increasing the VPPs per month. Again, this is getting away from, the history of the VIP program. And it's not like we didn't see this coming. This is, certainly it might get even worse before it gets better. But one of the things that they announced was any Stars coin in an account that is dormant for 6 months, isn't logged into or played a hand. I'm not exactly sure what they consider dormant, but any Stars coin are going to be confiscated and taken back by PokerStars if their accounts are dormant for 6 months. Now,
yeah, this is like, sorry to cut you off there, but it is more annoying nickel and diming. It is, I think, and this is what you're about to say, is it's not uncommon for loyalty programs or whatever to expire their badges or points. I mean, airlines do it, and we draw the comparison to airlines pretty much every time some change happens with the Stars Supernova or the Stars VIP program. But again, it's an annoying nickel and diming, trying to get debts off the books kinds of things in ways that there's an economic term for it when you have like something that affects a large number of people in a small way.
Oh, I know what it's called.
What's that?
That's called chewing your leg out to get out of the trap, kid.
God, I love that quote.
That's the one. That's exactly what I'm thinking of. As opposed to like when you have, when you affect a small number of people in a very large way, and the former always causes less outcry, right? Like if I rob 1 cent from 100,000 people, like those 100,000 people generally don't care. But if you rob $100,000 from one person, that person's going to scream bloody murder, or $1,000 from 1,000 people, like you're going to end up on the news. And this is sort of Stars kind of taking a lesson from let's screw over the supernovas. It's a supernova, rather, from a couple of years ago, and the bloody hell that raised, despite the fact that most people aren't supernovas. And then now just sort of saying, okay, we're going to expire Stars coins. Well, the people who are victimized by this are people who don't play very much poker, and they're not being victimized dramatically because if you did play a lot of poker, you're probably redeeming your Stars coins as you go so that, you can benefit from the rake back or, stress stars or whatever it is you like to buy. So, yeah, annoying. But again, it's probably not going to freak people out too much.
They have, according to their financial statements, they have $51 million in uncashed Stars coin on hand.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're talking about, right? So that's 1 million that they can. I mean, obviously some people are cashing them in, but let's say 70% of people, which I think is optimistic, actually manage to cash them in. So that's still 30% of 50 million. So that's $15 million they get to just clear off pretty much right away by not doing too much other than by sending an email to people.
So, you know what? I think it's a bigger number than that because I think you're right. It's going to be a lot of people with very small amounts worth of Stars coin, maybe $3 or $4 worth of Stars coin. They don't realize it. They don't log in. I'm guessing it's probably north of 50% that are going to get eaten up by this.
You can't even redeem thing. Like less than $10 worth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, there are probably people who haven't logged into they're probably like. I would say of that 51 million, I bet there's like 5 million locked up in people who haven't logged into their accounts in like 5 years.
It just seems so shady. Like it doesn't. There's no reason to take $3 from somebody.
But that's the thing. There's no reason to take $3 from somebody. But if you can take $3 from 100,000 people, then that's
it's not the PokerStars that I know. Or I mean, I guess that's gone.
Yeah, I mean, you should be used to that.
I know. I just it bothers me.
No, I agree. I mean. Yeah, I mean, this is the PokerStars that we live with today.
All right, why don't we take a break here? We'll come back. We've got lots more of In Case You Missed It and a whole bunch of other stuff to get to. We're also going to be joined by Run It Once coach Tyler Goggles Nose Forrester. He's a No Limit Hold'em coach. He's going to come in, join us, talk to us a little bit about the landscape of No Limit Hold'em in this day and age online, and give us some tips, hopefully. So we're going to hear him in the third segment. A bunch of emails to get to as well. We got a voicemail? Awesome.
I think so.
Good.
We're trying to swallow the water.
We'll get to that after the break. You're listening to the 2+2 Pokercast, presented by RunItOnce.com. More right after this.
What's up, guys? If you're serious about online poker tournament statistics, you got to check out Sharkscope.com. They've been the leader in online poker tournament tracking for over 10 years. If you've ever had the experience of being in an online tournament and being worried that your opponent might be a dangerous shark, Sharkscope.com will tell you. And your first 5 searches every day are free. If you log in with your Facebook account, they'll double that to 10 searches. So get on over to Sharkscope.com, track your stats, and improve your win rate today.
Hey, poker fans, don't forget about the 2plus2.com digital magazine. Each month, a wide array of poker professionals and media write fascinating articles about the game you love. Want to learn about big blind versus small blind hand ranges? How about optimal Jeopardy daily double strategy? Topics like those and many others are covered every month. Head on over to 2plus2.com to see what the magazine has to offer this month.
Hey, PokerCast fans, don't forget to follow me, Adam, and Ross on the old social medias. I'm at TChanPoker on Twitter, and once in a while I'll even talk poker if I'm not trying to hit him in the face. If Adam ever gets home from hockey practice, he tweets at PokerCast Adam, and Ross is at PokerCast Ross whenever he's sweating the Chicagos. Hit us up and try to keep it to 140 or less. I mean, fewer.
Welcome back to the 2+2 Pokercast, presented by RunItOnce.com. Let's get back to some more In Case You Missed It. Terrence, you got one?
Yeah, and it's funny because we call this In Case You Missed It. I might have missed this one if not for our old friend Mr. Michael Johnson posting on Twitter as I woke up yesterday morning, and he wrote a response to Tim Ferriss, and I don't exactly actually remember what MJ said, but he said, it made me click through to the original tweet, which was Tim Ferriss asking the poker community what questions that they would like to ask. Well, I guess not the poker community, just as listeners in general. Of course, Tim Ferriss hosts one of the most popular podcasts on all of the intertubes. What questions they should ask, that he should ask Phil Hellmuth. Now, Tim Ferriss, for those who don't know, he's got a podcast running. I think he's up to about 200 shows or so. Amateur that he is. But it's consistently like it's one of the top 5 podcasts in all of iTunes, and he has a great social network. So he manages to interview like the best of the best in tons of different fields, whether it's like technology and entrepreneurship, or like jiu-jitsu, or surfing, or chess playing, or he basically is like a degree of separation between like a super mega elite person in that field. Like he's had Arnold Schwarzenegger on the show or something like that. So he's got a great social network.
Cool.
And then so when I saw that Tim Ferriss was planning to have Phil Hellmuth on, via MJ's tweet, I sort of had like a mini heart attack because I'm a pretty big Tim Ferriss fan. I'm a big fan of his show, and so I was like, I can't do this. Like I responded to Tim Ferriss, and my tweet. Let me just pull up my own timeline right here. I have a hard time remembering exactly what it is I tweet, but I've got my tweet up here, and so I clicked through to his tweet, and there are multiple people already, some of whom I was familiar with and some of whom I wasn't, saying that like, look, don't have Phil Hellmuth on. You can have people who are better on. And what I wrote was, I'm echoing the comments of hardcore poker fans here. Phil is a pure self-promoter, and he's not on par with the people you usually interview. Like I said, this guy interviews like elite level, Navy SEALs and guys like that. And I continued, please consider why your at mentions are saying that you should interview anyone else. Fedor Holtz and Phil Galfond were both mentioned, I saw in the comments. Of course, we both know that those are 2 guys that would be awesome to interview in a mainstream context. And I said, don't be a part of Phil's self-aggrandizement, and I got 67 likes on that particular tweet. And then I have a bunch of like follow-ups, people tweeting, because the same thing that happened with me and MJ happened with other people. So other people who follow me as well as Tim Ferriss see these tweets. So Connor Drynan was saying like, do not have him on. Steve O'Dwyer said anyone but Hellmuth, please. JC Alvarado said, no. Ike Haxton. Like you have all of these people kind of coming out and saying like, no, this guy's a fraud, and he's, he didn't steal money from people, but he was very much representative of a poker site that stole money from people. So I've got a collection of tweaks. I've got Ike Haxton saying he's not competitive at an elite level, he's not an interesting speaker, and he promoted a site that robbed customers. Connor Drynan, I mentioned, he's not competitive. JC Alvarado says says it to Tim. I'm a longtime fan. Please don't have him on. Ryan Van Sanford, we understand you're in a tricky spot with the show, but understand Hellmuth is not a master of his craft, and this is about integrity. Dan O'Brien, just please don't ask him anything about poker strategy. I like your show and wouldn't be able to tolerate that nonsense. Benjamin Reason, among others, suggesting that Phil Galfond should be on, and your fans would enjoy that much more. David Benefield, don't let us down, Tim. Please get a poker player that is actually respected within the poker community to come on the show. So what basically happened was that there was enough sort of snow on the snowball rolling downhill that the poker community, the Twitter, the intersection, like if you grab the Venn diagram of the circle of people who are poker players and people who are fans of Tim Ferriss, they basically just flooded Tim's timeline with a please, oh God, do not have this guy on the show. And then, but the thing is, I think the problem is why I don't. So if any sort of movement would have worked, it would have been this one. But I think the problem is that like Tim would already set it up in advance, because I saw a tweet from Hellmuth which says like, which shirt should I wear? I'm going to be interviewed by Tim Ferriss. Which of these shirts should I be wearing? So it made me feel like it was already in motion and it was about to like happen like 3 hours from now. Yeah,
clearly Tim had lined it up, and then he goes to Twitter and feels like he's got the perfect person, and then all of a sudden all this feedback comes back, And now how does he go to Phil and go, oh, by the way, Phil, I've just read on Twitter all my @mentions. I don't want you on the show anymore. Like, you can't do that.
You know what Phil said to him?
I mean, people in general are really afraid of me.
I mean, you can't run a podcast like that. You just can't. You can't invite people and then say, no, by the way, you're an idiot. Apparently, then I'm not going to have you on. And
exactly.
And I'll also say that was, it makes me a bit uncomfortable. Look, Phil, obviously with the Ultimate Bet thing, despicable, all that stuff. Phil is, and all the people that you quoted that are inside this poker community, all feel the same way for good reason. But Phil's very, very popular amongst people who are casual players, right? And Tim Ferriss, I would imagine his audience is huge, very, very large, has a big cross-section of America, and a very small sort of the Venn diagram of people who are complaining and people who have a clue about what the complaints are about of the listenership of Tim Ferriss is probably pretty small.
But that's why it's really important, right? Like, that's why it's important for people like us and Ike and Tony Dunst and all this kind of stuff, is that like that the people don't know, right? So like if he gets whatever 2 million downloads and it's really just like 100 people on Twitter, like, but those 100 people are really knowledgeable, then somebody like Tim can sort of make this realization, like, wait, something isn't right here, because I've had lots of famous people on the show before. I've had lots of really high performing people on the show, and I don't know if this has never happened to him. It's probably happened for somewhere in the past, but like, why are people having such a negative reaction to this? And,
well, the other way he can find out is by interviewing him. Like, and people who listen to the show where Tim can ask questions and it becomes quick. I mean, there's a reason we all kind of laugh at Hellmuth, right? And Tim can ask in his format and how he goes about answering the questions, likely is going to find out why. Right?
But he can bluff his way through. Like, see, the thing is that Tim is not going to be as educated as like you and I on this topic, or like any poker player, or some random on NVG, because he doesn't immerse himself in this world, right?
So his questions likely aren't going to be, what are you going to do when you get 3-bet with ace queen off? Like, they're not going to be that question where they're going to be.
He's gonna bluff. Like, he's gonna go on the show and talk about white magic and
exactly
talk about soul reading people.
Can't Tim sniff out white magic?
And no, I don't think so. Like, because I mean, white magic maybe not specifically, but like the thing is that he goes on ESPN and like Phil does. And, he's constantly bluffing out that sort of 95% of the poker audience who really doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, because they're just flipping channels on ESPN. And then the 5% of us go on Twitter and lose our minds because we know what he's saying is absolute nonsense,
right?
Over and over and over. But like the average person, like, you have to immerse yourself in this world to know that you're not being caught up by like a guy who's just pulling one over on you, and Phil is a master at this. Like, there's no way the world would be having this reaction if it were Daniel Negreanu, right? Because people still consider somebody like Negreanu very much in the same, like, so Negreanu is equally as famous, right? Like, has that same sort of charisma and charm, although it's manifested differently. But people still generally consider him an elite level poker player. Like, he may not be like the best of the best of the best, but he's still an elite level poker player, still very much competitive, and he's never done things that are shady and unethical, or never been associated with a company who's done shady and unethical things, unless you want to call the VIP program whatever. But that's not nearly on the level, obviously, of Ultimate Bet. So why wouldn't you have someone like that on your show? And unfortunately, it comes down to the point where Tim didn't do his research. He just sort of was like, when you have I don't know what famous people's social Rolodexes and stuff look like, but I imagine it's something like Hellmuth's press agent just got to him one way or the other and presented himself, and Phil on this resume, it's like, oh yeah, 13-time World Series poker champion, youngest World Series main event winner in history, blah 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 blah. His list of paper credentials never stops, right? Because in poker we don't we have this world where it's like, oh well, we know for a fact that he probably couldn't even beat a 25-50 cash game. Like, that doesn't mean anything to something like Tim Ferriss.
I'll have you know, Philip Hellmuth Jr. has 14 bracelets, T, not 13.
whatever. Don't care.
And here's another thing I'll say. Is there a chance, while we're talking about Hellmuth, look, his results are really good in World Series. He's clearly up money long term in World Series, in a pretty large sample of World Series events. Is there a chance? He's very bad at mixed games. That's clear. I mean, we've seen that. The Raz final tables, and everything. But no limit hold'em. Is there a chance that he can't articulate the reason that he's good or he has good results with large field, or not even just large field, but no limit hold'em tournaments in general? Yeah,
there's definitely we've talked about this before. There's lots of things he's definitely good at. I mean, he's definitely good at playing, like I said, in these large fields against like a lot of amateur players. He definitely like casts a spell on, if there's like 6,000 people in a 1,500 tournament, there's probably like 3,000 of them that might be to some extent spellbound by sort of who he is. He probably makes live reads way better than the average.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he makes live reads excellent, and I think that there's a lot of things that he can't. He doesn't have the ability to explain why he's good at them.
Yeah, but he makes decisions that are mathematically absolutely unexplainable and cannot be justified in any ways. Like the mathematics of his game are atrociously bad, especially at the short stacks. And we've seen this time and time again, like limping into pots and folding with 6 big blinds or whatever. Like, there's no way you can explain that kind of thing away.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess I have less of a problem with him being on Tim Ferriss' show because I think that, would you say that Tim's show, the listeners would have sort of an above average IQ? Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, they do. But I mean, like that's the thing. When you're not an expert in a field, like, I mean, how hard would it be for someone to bluff you about, like, I mean, like, here, like, listen, like, let's suppose you and I weren't friends, okay, and I had managed to create this mythos about myself as an MMA fighter, and that I was like the greatest MMA fighter or whatever. How easy would it be for me to say a bunch of shit that was complete bullshit and bluff you out of it? Trivially.
Well, first of all, I think with Phil specifically, the way he approaches questions, like you said, we all laugh at it. It's the self-promoter, self-aggrandizing. I mean, I think it's going to be obvious to a lot of people because Phil can't help himself. He's gonna do what he does, and the reason we all laugh at him for doing what he does, I think a lot of people will do the same thing, and automatically their bullshit detector will go off immediately when he starts talking about himself in some context, right? So, I mean, I think they're going to find out. Like, Phil's going to.
Yeah, maybe
Phil's going to get exposed.
Phil is so over the top, like, and Phil is so, he can't help but name drop, which I think the listeners will sort of, if they catch anything, it'll catch that. It's like, oh, my friend Shaquille O'Neal, blah blah blah, whatever, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that is so, it's such like a massive personality flaw in him that he can't help, like, that he's like, he's so
well, he's insecurity. He's just a massive insecurity, right? And that's
he's
it's not criticism. I mean, it's just it's a fact. Like, it's pretty clear that he definitely wants people to think that he lives this, and maybe he does live this life. But if you live that life, you don't go out and say it all the time if you're not insecure, right?
Right. Yeah. Like, we all have flaws, obviously, but his
absolutely.
His happens.
His are on display, though.
Yeah. Exactly. Most people are much better at hiding them for whatever reason. But I mean, I really like, because the thing is that Tim's show is all about, like, getting elite experts in their field who can help, and sort of like the theme that he likes to sort of do is that, like, oh, there's, like, let's find the things that are in common with, like, elite level performers and people who are true masters of their craft. What do these people, like, have in common? What are the things that can translate to day-to-day life? And by having somebody like Phil, whose skill is not in poker, his skill is in self-promotion. Like, let's be very clear about this. He happens to be, like, good enough at poker that he's parlayed it into a tremendous, tremendous brand, and great for him. I mean, I hope he makes tons of money doing that. But to sort of, like, go on there, it's like, oh, as a fan of the show, it's so painful to see it. And hey, by the way, like, when you click on Tim's original tweet, my tweet is the first response. So hopefully Tim sees it, because I mean, a guy like him probably gets so many ad tweets you can't see them all. But
so you mentioned the 67 likes, which was interesting to me because I've been marathoning Black Mirror, and I recently watched the episode of season 3. I want to say it's episode 1, maybe, about the girl who's in the future is obsessed with her rating, because every
social media ratings,
every interaction that you have in this futuristic scenario, you have your phone in front of you and you make a rating 1 to 5 stars with this. If you're in a taxi or you say hi to a friend, boom, you got to rate this person. But the irony for me is I'm watching it on Netflix. So I watch it, the show's over, and then it says rate this show on Netflix. I was like, I'm like, awesome. Yeah, it was great. How close to that scenario are we?
I'm glad you're enjoying Black Mirror.
Oh, it's the best. I love this show. Yeah. Next thing, in case you missed it, Matt Savage, who we're friends with on Facebook, put out a poll where he often does this on Facebook. He'll talk about different scenarios in tournament poker, and he put out a poll that he wants to bring up at the next Tournament Directors Summit this year. And here, I'll read it. It says, Poker Playing Facebook Friends, I need opinions on if the following subject for next year's TDA Summit held at the RIO, should you be allowed to fold when it's your turn to act without facing a bet? Currently, it's just an etiquette violation and comes with a warning, but many feel it's their right because it's one of the 3 options like checking or betting. What is your opinion? So this is, let's say on the flop, it's check to you, and now you presumably have 3 options, but you really don't. When it's check to you, you can check or bet, and some people feel like they should be able to open fold in this spot. And before I give my opinion, T, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting because it's always been one of these things that's considered very gauche, right? Is to, you've got a 3-way pot, some guy raises, some guy calls, and you call out of the big blind. I mean, it's often considered an etiquette violation to just, if you're the big blind, to throw your cards away.
Well, there's a good reason for that. It's not just because it's an etiquette violation because it cedes so much more power. It shifts a lot of power to the person in position. So let's say there's 3 of us to the flop. I'm under the gun, Terrence. You're in middle position, and Ross is on the button. And the flop comes out, and I'm under the gun, and I open fold. I pass a bunch of equity from myself to Ross because you're in this bad spot now, right? Ross knows I folded.
Because there's one fewer person to check raise, basically. Like it offers power to the person in position because there's one fewer person that's available to check raise. Like normally, if you're the in position player, you only have to be worried about check raise by 1 guy instead of by 2 guys. Now, the sort of counter argument to this, and I don't know that it's a good one, but if you play online poker, you've always been allowed to do this.
Yep.
Right? Like there's always like if on every single poker site I think I've ever played on, if you are first to act and you're not facing a bet and you hit fold, it will say,
are you sure you want to fold?
Yeah, something to the effect of checking is free, or do you want to fold? And then most of the time people they were just misclicking, so they click check. But there's no punishment actually for folding.
Right.
Like you're not going to get a warning from the poker site. It's considered one of the 3 legal options. And if you think about it, there's no, yes, you are doing there, but you are doing something that benefits somebody else disproportionately. That's still in the pot. But there's a lot of things that, there's a lot of sort of things that could be done too. Like there's a lot of people that sort of pick up their cards off the table and check, that's sort of like the clear sort of, I have no interest in this pot. There are people who let's say I'm second under the gun, and so under the guns, thinking about making his decision. I've seen second under the gun hold their cards out 6 inches from them, just waiting to snap fold.
Yeah.
As soon as the under the gun guy drops his chips into the pot, he's flagrantly not gonna pull his cards back and he's just flagrantly pretty much folding out of turn. Yeah. So the sort of counter argument can be made that there's a lot of just because this is an event, there's when you start policing sort of behavior in multi-way pots, right? Like I sort of think that that's the argument to be made there.
Well, I think you can police it when you have the ability to do so, and like we were saying before, I think it's a pretty significant shift in equity for the person that gets harmed by this. So, we have a system in place right now where it's an etiquette violation. People rarely do this. If they do it, it's 95% by accident. If it's not by accident, they are warned and they can be penalized for it. So it should actively changing this rule to get away from that, when I don't see this as a really big problem that needs to be addressed. Like, I don't see people complaining or standing up or holding up signs that say I should be able to fold a open fold here. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem.
I agree with you. It's certainly there's no sort of impetus towards it. I think the reason that Matt puts this out there is because I think the current situation is unclear. As far as I know, there's no rule against it or specifically stating that it's allowed. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is create a lack of ambiguity, create some clarity in the situation here, because it's always sort of been just an etiquette thing, like, hey, you don't fold when there's no action to you. And I think I would guess Matt, being sort of the diligent kind of guy he is sort of looking towards that. And like, you're right, it's not a problem. Like, it's not an issue. And if somebody were to make a rule saying you're not allowed to, I would not be out on the streets holding a sign protesting this by any means. Because I don't think it's a clear. I don't think it's like clearly the case that folding folding to no bet is like an unethical action.
Also, it really helps you out if you're more aware than everybody else at your table.
If you're more aware?
Yeah. If you're watching for these type of things, you have an advantage.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, well, okay, so there's a couple things. So Ross brings that up. But one more thing I wanted to mention was so in the situation where, A, B, and C, act in that position, and A folds out a turn, C gets a big advantage. Well, yeah, that's the case, but in flop games, the button moves around the table and position is changing, right? So right now it goes ABC, but the next hand it might go CBA or CAB, depending on what the action is, and the hand after that it might go BCA, right? So the button moves. So if everybody's allowed to fold out of turn and everybody kind of does it equally, then it doesn't matter, right? And these are sort of like.
Oh, it does matter. It changes the game a lot. If people are allowed to open fold.
What I'm saying is like, yeah, okay, so you're in first position and I'm in second position and Ross is in third position, and you fold. That gives Ross a big advantage over me. But the button can move later on so that Ross is in first position, you're in second position, I'm in last position, right? So like there's certain asymmetries that sort of happen in nine-handed poker. Like, there's one big fish in the pot, right? Like that changes the whole thing. Like if the fish is in seat 4, we all know that seat 5 is the best seat to have, and seat 6 is the best after that. And there's all these asymmetries that happen, but this is just sort of like the nature of nine-handed poker. So that was one point. And the other point that I want to make was Ross was saying, like, yeah, you definitely have a big advantage when you're playing. And you should definitely, by the way, even if the rule comes out and it's like, okay, now it's perfectly legal to fold to no action and you shouldn't ostracize people for it, you should still never do it, because for simply balancing your range, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Like, it is
if you
really
if you check and don't throw your hand away.
If you have a checking, like a checkout, like they used to, I don't know if the kids use this term anymore, but it's generally called checking out when you just throw your hand away when you could have checked. But yeah, like if you have some percentage of your range where you fold instead of just checking, then clearly you're already unbalancing yourself by simply the fact that when you check, you are far more likely to actually have a hand and continue interest in the pot. So it's actually a way of making, even though in that hand it costs you nothing because you were going to check fold anyway, it still costs you in the meta game, the overall game. Like, you're making your out of position disadvantage even bigger.
Well, you're defining your range, which we do definitely.
I mostly mean pre-flop. If you're watching the other players that are specifically behind you, and you are trying to, say, isolate someone, and you can see that somebody's preloading or holding their cards in a way that they're going to fold, a rule would never be able to stop that from happening. It's just a good thing to be aware of. It comes up in a hand that I played later on.
Yeah, we're going to get some Ross.
Yeah, like sometimes you just get that one guy at the table who looks at his cards immediately, and like you can tell if that guy's folding. So if you happen to be to his right, awesome. If you happen to be on his left, that sucks.
All right, let's move on. In case you missed it, it kind of sucks to beat Phil Ivey right now. And I don't know if I've ever thought that or said that in my entire life. But right now, I'm not sure. Would you trade places with Phil Ivey right now, T?
I don't trade places with anybody.
But you know what I mean. Like, I'm just saying.
Yeah. He's not running to the best.
Well, he's not. First, he lost his lawsuit against Crockford's, the casino in the UK, that he won €8 million or British pounds. Sorry, he won $8 million British pounds. He didn't get paid, and they found out that he was edge sorting. Of course, we've talked about this a lot, playing baccarat with knowledge of the first card off the deck, and then a judgment went against him. He also did this at the Borgata. He won $9.6 million there, US dollars. They paid him out. But then went after him, and a judgment was against him about a month ago, I believe, that he had violated the contract of, or he didn't. It wasn't fraud, but he'd violated the contract of supposed to lose. I guess when you walk into a casino, you're supposed to lose. That's the
You're not supposed to lose. You have a social contract with the casino that you are going to lose.
You're required to lose.
It's your obligation as a person to lose, and it's their obligation to take your money.
Yeah, so he lost the Crockford suit where he didn't get paid. The Borgata sued him, and he lost that where he did get paid. So he's got to return $9.6 million plus interest plus what the Borgata. So when they got the judgment, the judge went to them. Okay, we want your damages, and they went away and tried to figure out what the damages were against Phil. So they came back, and they now feel that Phil owes them the $9.6 million he won, plus interest. Second, they want $250,000 in comps that they lavished him with for his play. $250,000 in comps, which is pretty amazing. Third, this is the beautiful one, they're pursuing Ivey for expectation damages.
Ooh, that's nasty. That's a triple.
Dipple. That is the third nasty thing. So they calculated his stakes, the time that he played, and decided that Ivey and his accomplice should have lost, with the expectation, they should have lost $5.4 million.
What?
So they listed his play. In April 2012, Ivey played 1,180 hands with an average bet of $25,000. In May of 2012, he played 4,200 hands with an average bet of $36,000. In July of 2012, 1,300 hands with an average bet of $93,000. And in October, 1,850 hands with an average bet of $96,000. So he was playing sky high here. And ended up winning.
So they're calculating all the hands he played, and they're saying, well, let's multiply all the hands he made by his average bet there, and the house edge on baccarat is whatever, 1.5% or whatever it is, and he therefore owes us 1.5% or whatever it is of all the action that he put into play.
Now you can see the flaw here, right, T?
I can see more than one. which one of the flaws would you like me to point out?
The most blatant one is obviously Phil Ivey and his accomplice aren't going to be playing this stakes in this many hands with a negative expectation. I mean, it's just, yes, Phil used to love playing dice, etc., but we'll get to that in a sec. But to go ahead and tell the judge that, look, he played this much, and when the judge knows he played with an edge, and all of a sudden that they can just assume that he's going to be able to, they're going to get his action when you turn around and he has no edge is hilarious to me.
Ugh.
This is the sort of thing that really, like, it should be out there on, like, every major American news channel and everything like that. For the, we just finished talking 10 minutes ago about, like, what the average person knows about gambling, and we know it's not very much. We all have, that uncle who thinks he knows things about gambling, and we're just like, no. But, like, the fact that the casino can basically go, like, hey, you did a thing that's not cheating. So this has now been ruled in court that it's not cheating and it's not fraud. You can go into a casino and not cheat, but do a thing that gives you an advantage and basically outsmart the casinos. And if you win, not only are you expected to pay back the money once you win, but they also calculate the amount that they typically win from suckers and say that money that we usually win off of a sucker, now we have to apply this as you, the smart, professional, intelligent gambler, and say you actually owe us the money that a sucker would have lost to us had you been a sucker. Like, that is the kind of thing, like, how is this not on, like, 60 Minutes or whatever, like, media shows, like, news magazine shows, like, when I was a kid, it was, like, 2020, and all those, like, investigative shows, like, this is greed, like, beyond a level, and I'm as pro-rah-rah capitalism as, like, anybody you'll ever find, but this is insane. I had a friend message me privately and says, like, so, like, if a casino came out with a promotion and they just did, like, the math completely wrong, let's just say they decided to pay you whatever 3-1 on blackjack, and, like, all the players, like, come and start, like, gambling, and they start smashing it, and, you know, they come, like, you're gonna go back to all the players and say, well, oops, like, you guys aren't actually supposed to have the best of it on blackjack, so not only do we want all the money, we also want all the money that at our regular rate, had we not done an idiotic promotion, that you guys would have lost to us. And that we think is fair. And then for some judge to actually go, yep, that sounds about right. Like, that seems like the appropriate response. Like, and to say
well,
that
the
this
judge
is like
hasn't
a
said that
social
yet.
contract, like, this is insane.
The judge hasn't done this yet. This is what they've come.
I know, but the potential for this happening is
right.
like non-zero.
It's non-zero.
Fired up.
So and the other thing that's hilarious to me is they ask for what they would have lost, the $5.4 million, but they want the comps back, the $250,000 in comps that they would give to anybody who lost $5.4 million. Right. By the way, you got to pay us what you lost, but you know those comps that we give everybody else that does this? No, we want those back.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's, I mean, and I, like, look, I have a lot of friends. I've never been like a serious advantage player in any way, but I have a lot of friends who are really, like, good at advantage play and, like, spotting dumb promotion, and, like, this makes me so happy. Like, if you're out there and you're a friend of mine, and, you know, even if you're a complete stranger, like, and if you're willing to just tell me a story about how you got the best of it against casino and crushed them, like, please just send it to me.
Oh, yeah.
So that
we'll read those.
so that it warms my heart at night.
It warms
because like, these guys just deserve to lose more than anybody. Like, just oh God. I mean,
it warms my feelings at night.
It's so frustrating. It really is.
Worst. This is the worst.
So
what else have we got? Just get me off of this.
Well, first I wanted to quickly say
you ruined my life.
We talked about Phil Ivey in the past playing craps. He was certainly known to, you know, work the comms angle, play high limit craps. But somebody who's kind of close to Phil once told me that he does this thing, and Phil will sell off his craps action to people, his friends, fellow guys who like the pit or like to have a gamble. And what he did was, and nobody really knew how much maybe he did, but this person didn't know how much he would have of himself typically when he played, you know, 10,000 a roll in dice or whatever he would, but he'd get the comps, right? So right. Meanwhile, he's piecing but he gets to fly in the planes and, you know, get the hotel suites and stuff. So, and everybody else, you know, would want to buy his action because he's Phil Ivey. He's going to win, right? He runs good. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's that. I mean, certainly there's an aspect of swindling your friends in there.
Not if they know.
Why are you buying a piece of somebody's craps action?
That's not
like,
swindling.
You and I have been friends for like 15 years. If you were like, I'm going to go in the pit and gamble, do you want to buy a piece? I would be like, what is wrong with you?
Right, but if you say yes, that's not swindling you.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, it's just a matter of like, oh, are you smart enough to have really dumb friends with money? I guess.
Or guys who love to gamble. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Jeez.
All right, we'll calm tea down here and move on. In case you missed it, the World Series of Poker circuit events, they've added 6 more foreign events for this year, the 2016-2017 season. Last year, you'll remember, Caesars ran events in places like Rozvadov in the Czech Republic, Campione in Italy, St. Martin, Paris, Sydney, our favorite Punta del Este, This year they've expanded to add Marrakesh, Morocco, Cannes in France, Estoril, Portugal, and in Brussels in Belgium.
Did you have to look up where Estoril was?
I don't know where Estoril. Oh, it's
Idiot from Northern Europe.
No, that's Southern Europe. Well, it is Western Europe. It's in Portugal. I don't know.
Belgium's getting northern, I guess.
No, Estoril is in Portugal. I don't know where in Portugal it is.
Belgium was the last one you said on the list.
Oh, Brussels. Yeah, sorry.
To be on the beach. It's pretty nice, actually.
Oh, you've been there?
No, I'm just looking at it right now. It's on the very southern tip of Portugal. Looks like it's on beachfront. Looks pretty fancy.
Nice.
Buongiorno.
I love that movie. They've got one more stop to announce that they haven't quite finalized yet, coming up in recent months. So interesting that they're turning this into... the World Series of Poker was made fun of for a long time for not actually being a World Series of Poker. It was more of a U.S. Series of Poker. And granted, this is the circuit events. This isn't the main bracelet events, but they are making an effort to get to places where poker is expanding and helping to do that. So that's I was happy about that. In case you missed it, the tax implications of the final table, the November 9 of the World Series of Poker, I thought were a little interesting. Let's break this down. Qui Nguyen won $8 million, of course. He is an American, paid 3.3, or was going to pay $3.3 million in tax, 41.51%. I guess it depends what state you're in, different state taxes versus federal tax. He is responsible for 41% of that win for tax. So he ends up, actually doesn't win $8 million. He wins 4.6 something million. Gordon Vail, also American. Well, the top four were American. Vail wins 4.6. He is in a 51% tax bracket. I mean, is that California maybe? I'm not sure. He pays $2.4 million of his 4.6 in tax. So instead of winning 4.6, he is going to take home 2.2.
Really? Wow.
Cliff Josephie, Johnny Bax, wins $3.4 million. He is going to pay 48% tax, 1.6. So he is taking home 1.8. Michael Ruan.
Do you get any of that money back?
Not unless you have offsetting losses of that giant amount of money.
Time to go to the pit, baby.
Yeah.
Speaking of pit gambling.
Right. And you got to remember, guys like Gordon Vail, Michael Ruan finished fourth, $2.5 million, pays $1.1 million in tax. I mean, they were also pieced out, right? So let's take Michael Ruan. I don't know one way or the other, but I'm going to assume, let's just assume he pieced himself out and was playing for, let's say 50%. He was playing for 50. He won 2.5. He pays 1.1 in tax, so he takes home 1.4. He's playing for 50%. He takes home $700,000 after tax. Now, $700,000 is a lot of money, but this is a $10,000 70 buy-ins of a $10,000 tournament.
We know clearly that the real winners of the World Series of Poker are the IRS.
No question. Top four Americans. Wojtek Ruzicka. So I listened to the show that you guys did when I wasn't around, and Ryan had a bit of a hard time with Ruzicka, only because I think one of our listeners sent me an email kind of pointing out
he wasn't a 19.
Ryan,
he didn't grow up watching hockey games in the NHL in the late 90s.
So Ruzicka, he would finish fifth. One wins $1.9 million. He pays only 15% tax from the Czech Republic, so he paid $290,000. He ends up making $1.6 million after tax. Kenny Hallert is from Germany, who pays 0% tax for gambling winnings. He won $1.4 million for the Germans. For sixth, and takes home $1.4 million. He won more than many of the people. And when I had Kenny on, he made it pretty clear. He didn't say exactly, but it sounded like he had most of himself.
Uh-huh.
So Kenny was one of the bigger winners at taking home $1.4 million.
Yeah.
Griffin Banger, Canadian, he wins 1.2. He pays 30%. Now that's the withholding tax in Las Vegas.
Flat withholding tax.
Flat 30%. His Canadian tax liability is to be determined. It's very gray and murky here in Canada.
But it's generally thought I know you've studied this stuff more than I do, but I mean, like sort of one-off poker tournament winnings are generally thought to be non-taxable in Canada. Isn't that right? Like unless like gambling's actually your job, then.
But Griffin's going to have a hard time explaining that he is an accountant or something other than a
professional video game player.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or you know what I'm saying? Like it's a gray area in Canada for sure. He's gonna have some decisions to make as far as what he's going to do with his taxes.
But the good news is, I'm sure. Like I think there is a double taxation thing in play, that if he ends up having to pay money to the Canadian government, then I think he will get some of that back from the U.S. So that'll basically just be more money for Mr. Trudeau to spend and less money for Mr. Trump to spend. So,
that would be correct.
If you count that as a win, then you're cheering for his accountant.
Last thing, and in case you missed it, PokerStars has introduced a new poker format that they're calling Beat the Clock. I'm not
one
sure
more thing before you get to the next one.
Sure.
You should probably real quick should reference where you got that info from, which is Russ Fox's
Russ
blog.
Fox.
He does this every year. Taxabletalk.com is where you can find that stuff. He breaks it down in like detail. Like as you mentioned, Gordon Vail gets it up the rear end before being a California resident, and talks about all the other sort of jurisdictions that these other gentlemen live in, and why they paid the amounts that they did. So if you want to do that, check out Russ Fox's excellent tax blog.
And not just that, if you're a poker player that has any kind of income that is subject to tax, Russ Fox has been around and dealt with every situation for decades.
He's longer than I've been playing poker, as far as I know.
Yeah, he's been a gambling tax expert. If you and he's not expensive, by the way. I've used him. He's very reasonable with his prices, and he's going to. The amount of money and the advice you get is ridiculous for the amount of money you pay if you have this tax liability. If you have any at all interest in saving money or doing things right, Russ Fox is the guy you want to go talk to. Believe me, 100%. Again, so last thing, PokerStars, they introduced a new format. They're calling it Beat the Clock, and this is a 48-man sit and go. So this is sort of this. We've seen spin and goes come along. PokerStars is searching for these new and exciting sort of formats for casual players, for people who don't have a ton of time to to have some fun. Maybe they play on the mobile app. We're moving away from the traditional how you think of sitting down and playing in a sit and go or a cash game, and they're bringing these new formats along to sort of change how we look at poker for the good or for the bad. That sort of depends on your viewpoint. This is a 48-man sit and go played in four-handed tables, and it's hyper turbo structure. So you start with a 5K stack. The blinds are 200, 400, and they're 1 minute blind levels, and so it goes from 200, 400, 255, 36, 48. And so I played a bunch of these, and what happens is you have 5 minutes. This tournament lasts 5 minutes, and however many chips you have at the end of this 5 minutes, you get redeemed for. So let's say you start with your 5,000, and you run it up to 20,000, you're going to end up with a little, and again, it's 5 with a 50 cent, so 10% rake, so you're actually contributing $450 to the prize pool. If you have 22,000, let's say by the end of the 5 minutes, you've quadrupled up, you're going to get somewhere around $20 back. And these things are fantastically tilting. I played 20 of them today. I think I went 10 in a row without cashing.
So you're gonna have to explain this to me. Like, what exactly makes this different from a cash game? Like why do you?
Well, it's different than a cash game. It's a sit and go. But
it's essentially like you're kind of getting paid as if it were a cash game.
It's true. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess
they've ran a lot of time tournaments. I remember I've played a lot of time tournaments in the tournament lobby, which is essentially the same thing with a bit of a better structure.
Right. Yeah. Well, better, I guess, is subjective on what you think is good structure and what isn't. Some people like these. And George Lind, for instance, was Supernova Elite for years because he played Supernova or played Hyper Turbos. To answer your question, I really don't understand why these are even a thing, because if you play these 48-man sit and goes with 1 minute blind levels, the tournament isn't going to last much more than 5 minutes to begin with. Yeah. I mean, it might last 8 minutes or something like that. So why all of a sudden you cut off at 5 minutes? I don't know, but they're insanely popular. As I'm playing these things, the highest level they offer them are $5. So I'm playing as many as will pop up, and these things are filling like one will fill every 20 seconds kind of thing. They're going off really fast. People, I guess it's a new format. I understand that, but also people seem to be enjoying them. But yeah, it's weird. I guess there's something to. And Scott Wilson, our friend, chimed in on this and said the concept is making a defined length of time for the tournament. It's exactly 5 minutes. Oh, I've got 5 minutes. I sit down. I can do this. If you sit in a hyper turbo, is it going to last 23 minutes? Is it going to last 11 minutes? What is it going to last? Right? I guess people. That makes sense. Yeah, they want to know that it's going to last 5 minutes. The rake obviously is huge because you play for 5 minutes and you get this. Maybe you double your buy-in, whatever. You get back $9, and then you go ahead and pay another 10% to play another 5 minutes. Which these things are just rake generating machines.
Sounds like it.
All right, let's come back after the break. We're going to jump into the mailbag. We've also got a Run It Once guest. Keep it right here. You're listening to the 2+2 Pokercast, presented by Run It Once. More right after this.
Okay, people. Most of the kittens have perished. There are a few left you can save, though, and here's how to do it. Get involved with the Pokercast by emailing your questions, suggestions for the show, or even record a sound clip. Adam will be using the best ones on the air. Well, let's face it, probably the worst ones as well. I can see you there at your computer. Send an email right now. Totally disagree with one of Adam's takes last week? Send an email. Love last week's interview? Email. Want to know how much cash Adam has on him right now? Email. Pokercast at 2plus2.com is the address. Ship the funny to Adam today.
Before we go on, a quick note from one of our sponsors, Sharkscope.com. Do you play online poker on multiple sites with multiple screen names? Want to find out what your real profit and ROI numbers are? Once you register at Sharkscope.com, they give you up to 10 free searches a day. So go ahead, put your screen name into the player statistics section. If you've opted in, all your stats will appear. Even if you're not, you'll get a snapshot of your stats. Want to combine all your screen names into a group and see where you really stand? For as little as $10 a month, you can access the advanced features at Sharkscope.com. Sharkscope.com, the best for over 10 years. Track your statistics, avoid the sharks, and find easier tournaments at Sharkscope.com. Welcome back to the 2+2 Pokercast, presented by RunItOnce.com. Today, T, we are joined, as we have been each week, by a Run It Once coach. This is Tyler Forrester, known as Goggles Nose, I believe, from Montana. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I appreciate it. And it's Goggles Nose.
Goggles Nose. Where's the name? What's the derivative of Goggles Nose?
There's a famous Russian author named Nikolai Gogol who wrote a story about a nose that runs off a person's face, and he wakes up in the morning and can't find his nose. And me being about 21 when I chose the screen name, that's what I went with.
It was on your mind.
It's such a funny thing that we probably all of us when we signed up for online poker names, we've all been around for a while. Like we gave zero thought to it, and it was just like this. Probably it was just like a form that was like really annoying. And I was like, oh man, I have to think of a name. Like there's probably some guy like, the first thing he looks at on his desk, so now he's pencil 479 or something like that. Like you got all these guys who created screen names when they were like underage teenagers. I mean, like
I love the WNBA.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, does Jonathan Karamolikis really like the fact that he's XX Monster Dong? Like, I mean, just boy. I mean, he probably does.
He probably loves it, to be honest. Let's be fair.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, isn't it? It's such a fact. We gotta have a show that's just dedicated to screen like online poker name sort of regret.
Well, let's do it now. T, what was your first online poker name at? I'm guessing Party Poker or Planet Poker. What was your first name?
Well, it would have been Planet, but I mean, I can't even think of my name on Planet Poker, and I can't even think of my name on Paradise. God, I'm the absolute worst. Yeah, I think my first screen name on PokerStars was Terrence.
Way to go! Way to go!
I think it was. I first started playing on PokerStars as Terrence.
Nice. Mine still is, because at Stars, of course, you can't change. Although I was offered one time that you could change your name on Stars, but I didn't take it. Naslin.
I only got to change, by the way, because of course I had like a 3-year period where I was working for Stars.
You could change
that's
it.
the only reason.
Yeah. But on sorry to bother Tyler with all this, but while we're on it, I was Raisin Pitch was my first name at Party Poker.
Raisin Pitch.
Raisin, like as in the dried up grape, and pitch is all one word. So because of course you raise and you throw your hand away with after, right? You Raisin Pitch. I don't know. It was just this dumb name that I got stuck with. And
clever.
Yeah, and then I went through a period where The Good and the Bad, the Ugly was my favorite movie for a long time. So I became, anytime I opened up a new account, I called myself Tuco Ramirez after Eli Wallach's character.
Oh.
And yeah, so dumb reasons you end up getting. Was Goggles Nose your screen name on every site?
No, I can't even remember now. I think I was the Black Death on one of them, and all sorts of scary names. I was really into intimidating my opponents at age
Have like a
21.
Grim Reaper avatar, that kind of thing?
Yeah, just anything to throw them off.
Did you start?
I don't know how intimidating a little icon blinking can possibly be. But,
right.
I was super convinced that was the way to go.
Well, I mean, if you can gain a 0.0001% edge by your screen name, you take it, right?
Well, the ones that always mess with me are the ones that like imply some sort of style, right? Like I never bluff or something like that in the screen name, and then all of a sudden this guy's like shoving 2x pot for at you in the river, and you're like, is this name a reverse? Is it a war?
It's ironic.
On? Like I hate that.
That's why I like
crazy when people...
I like the full tilt. Choose your like character. You know,
because you
would try and elicit some sort of like personality traits from the choice of their character.
Oh, remember True Poker? Where you, I don't know if Tyler played, but True Poker, you pick your own guy.
Yeah, you've never been at a table where that was 80% chicks, but somehow in True Poker, it was you were pretty much
they were all
at a table that was 8 big-breasted women. Somehow, I don't know how that always happened.
Blonde with the dealer.
I did not play on that poker site, and I wish I had.
Oh, True Poker was awesome. It was
look
3D.
Up some screenshots if you can Google those.
You could only play one game at a time because it took so much memory to run this 3D table. But the games were because you could only play one table, the games were fantastic because everybody else wanted to 4-table at the time was the thing. They could 4-table in Party Poker. We're not going to play in True Poker. So the games were always good because they were just such resource hogs on your computer. But yeah, interesting. Anyway, sorry, we're way off topic here. Tyler, thanks for joining us. Wanted to bring you in and wanted to talk a little bit. You're a no limit hold'em guy, and you've been playing no limit hold'em for a long time. I wanted to get your take on where no limit hold'em is going, because we've got to this point now with. A lot of people will blame it on a lot of things, training sites, notes, HUDs, whatever you want to say, Poker Tracker, different things where no limit hold'em is getting to this sort of place where maybe it's solved or it's close to solved. Bots can run rampant on sites and be winning, players because the decision trees aren't that big. And we've gone to this sort of GTO versus exploitive type thing as well that's changing the game at the same time. And I wanted to get your take sort of on a couple of the topics there. First, the direction that no limit hold'em's going, and then sort of this GTO exploitive type thing.
When we started playing in 2004, 2005 for you guys, I know that's when I started, no one knew anything about how to play Texas Hold'em. They didn't spread no limit games outside of Texas. And it was really the first couple of years where anybody had ever really made a shot at it, and certainly no one had played six-handed before. So when we came in, we knew absolutely nothing about no-limit Texas Hold'em, and we could limp. I remember playing a complete limping strategy. I remember a strategy where I raised 6 big blinds every hand pre-flop, and I won money. I'm doing all those things. And so over time, though, the player pool has gotten tougher, and that makes sense. I mean, we've had 10 years now to study the game, 10 or 12 now. And over that time period, we've learned a lot about how to play a lot better. And because poker's a negative-sum game, and the average player is going to lose, so every year the player pool is going to get a little bit harder. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. Like, that's been my favorite part about being a poker player, is being able to get a little bit better at the game every year. I never would have played poker for as long as if I'd kept playing my strategy that I played in 2005. I would have grown bored with it. And honestly, even though we're starting to see solvers roll out, and we do have some concerns about bots, poker is still really hard. No Limit's not an easy game, and it's not nearly close to solved. We're just beginning to see the first edges of what GTO play can do. And honestly, the key misconception about GTO play is the fact that it is the best possible response against the best possible counter strategy. And it turns out in poker that the best response against the best possible counter strategy doesn't beat the recreational player for the highest amount of money, and it won't beat strategies that aren't that strategy oftentimes for the most amount of money. So you end up in a situation where GTO, even though it's very strong, isn't the sort of strategy that can blanket decimate a player pool. You can guarantee a win rate against the average player, which is great, but you can't guarantee a large win rate against the average player. And because of rake and because of other factors and because we want to maximize our winnings, knowing how to exploit recreational players and knowing how to exploit players who are playing suboptimally is a super important part of the game. And it's never going to go away. And honestly, if we start to look at how someone like Pio designs his strategies, he's solving 40, 50, 60,000 different turns and rivers in milliseconds, and there's no way a human's going to be able to copy that. So even though we know that optimal strategy exists and we could theoretically put it on a computer drive, we as a human will never be able to play it. So there's always going to be a human factor to it. Honestly, I think it'll probably become a lot closer to chess, where you use your chess engine off the table to figure out what your best possible moves were in a situation. But while you're playing chess, you still have to figure out how to play, and there's still going to be certainly a rank of players. Even though I have access to a chess engine, I'm never going to be as good as a top flight chess player.
I guess the worry though there, Tyler, is that even though, you can't use a computer when you're playing in a live chess tournament, we also have a situation in chess where, you would never play online poker, or online chess, for large amounts of money because of the probability somebody could be running a solver. And secondly, you just don't, chess has the sort of the issue of variance, which affects things, much lower variance than does poker. So, I mean, I can see your argument making the case for, okay, well, live poker will still always be viable because even if computers do come up with a GTO strategy, it's not one that's realistically going to be implemented by players. But what does that sort of say about the future of online poker, or what can be done about the future of online poker if that's the case?
I think that we'll continue to see the sites make progress in figuring out how to defeat bots. And honestly, I don't think at this point the poker solvers are nowhere near competitive with a chess engine. I can download a chess engine ready to play in an online situation, and it will let me play almost probably as well as a grandmaster. And I can put it on my phone. And for right now, if you want to run a software like Pio, you're talking about running cloud server space in the cloud, and then running these sims overnights, and then if you have miscalculations in the game trees, because they're not complete game trees, you have to specify bet sizings, you have to specify ranges, then you're going to have a completely unapplicable strategy, even though you've GTO'd a situation. But because of the way your parameters are built, you're never going to have an accurate answer. So we're not really at the stage yet where, I can play poker on my phone and come up with perfect strategies, and I'm not sure if we're going to see that in any reasonable amount of time. Poker's decision space is a lot broader, and we're going to have to be looking again at exploitive plays and things, and those sort of models to build into a GTO system like Pio is going to take time. Pio at this point is running linear regressions behind the scenes and has no exploitive component. So we need to see an exploitive component before it become really, really viable.
Can you explain what Tyler? Sorry to interrupt you. For people who don't know what Pio is.
Pio solver is just a GTO solver that's on the market. There's 3 of them, I think, that I'm aware of. There's one called Postflop, one called Pio, and one called Gtorb. And they're basically high-end tools for professional poker players. I think Pio's entry level is about $300 for the software, and if you want pre-flop capabilities, it's $1,000. ish. So we're talking professional software for professional poker players. And what the software essentially does is it solves situations given some criteria. And you have to supply the criteria, so this makes the chicken and the egg problem. You have to know what the best strategy is to supply it to PIO, and then PIO will solve for it. And then it pops out basically an optimal strategy based on those restrictions you made in game. And it's become a fairly viable tool for how professional poker players are looking at how to play poker, but it isn't to the point where you can take it and just, run 3 sims and then become a great poker player.
So again, they're not running. You're not, playing them. You're using the software during a hand. I've got, King 10 of clubs here. What do I do? It's a play the hand out, or supposed. I would guess this is what it's supposed to be for. Play a hand out and then punch the hand in and see if you played it correctly.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you do, but you'd have to supply assumptions to the model.
Right.
So it's a lot like hand reading in poker. Even though, we both could use similar logic in the hand, ultimately I'm going to hand read better than a lot of other players. But the words out of my mouth are going to be the exact same as some of the other players in the player pool. I'm just going to do a better job of hand reading because I have more experience doing it. And that's something that, you're still missing in the PIO situation, which isn't true for chess again. In a chess situation, I don't need to know basically anything about chess except which way the pieces move to be able to run a decent chess engine.
Go ahead. No, I didn't want to interrupt. Sorry.
So this is a situation where we've still got a lot of work to be done to make really great strategies out of it. It's just really exciting to get to the point here where we do have some answers to some of these situations, because I know probably the hardest part about being a poker player is wondering whether or not I made the right decision. And using GTO to basically say, my decision couldn't possibly have been that bad. It was in the game tree of a GTO against a strategy that I think my opponent played makes my life so much easier.
You don't have regrets. The poker playing regrets is what you're saying.
Well, it's really funny. The academic literature actually uses the term regret minimization when it talks about how you play poker, and I always like that term, regret minimization.
That is good. I like it. One of the things I always thought about was, why if we're getting close to 100 big blind deep, no limit hold'em, 6 max type thing being solved, why there isn't a movement to switch to like 300 big blinds deep. And I understand people, it's a question of supply and demand, but if you have deeper SPRs, you're going to have a much bigger game tree in my mind. At least this is what I'm thinking, and it would be much harder to solve.
So I've left the impression that it's solved. It's not solved. 6 max game's never going to be able to be solved. It has to do with the way the math works behind the scenes, but you end up in situations where essentially two players can collude against a third player. So you see this in tournaments occasionally. If you have aces in with 10 players left in a nine payouts to the World Series of Poker at $10,000 apiece, and you're sitting in 10th place, and there's 10 of you left. Actually, you're not in 10th. You're in some other position. But there's 10 of you left, and you just have to wait one last guy until you get paid. So you're going to get paid $10,000. The tournament's going to end. And if you jam all in that situation with, say, aces, and someone calls, you've actually lost money.
Right.
In fact, you both lost money. And it turns out that those situations are actually relatively common in 6 max poker, where essentially the way that the players play behind you is going to affect your win rate and position, along with the way the whole table plays affects the game. So there's no easy solver solution that you can plug in and expect to have 6 max poker solved in any reasonable amount of time. In fact, I don't even think it's possible. Because of those situations. So we're not to the point yet where it's like, oh, I'm just going to plug this into a computer and get the right answer. It's more like, if I know a lot about poker, I can model a situation such that I have a decent idea about whether my strategy would have fallen off a cliff against a good player or would have been okay. And if a player does deviate from optimal strategy, let's say, how do I exploit it? So we're moving into a sort of poker player that's a little bit more analytical than it was in the past. In 2006, for example, essentially the key skills were hand reading. If you could hand read and then you didn't give away too much information with your bet sizing, you're going to do pretty well. And the key skills in 2016 are you need to know what sort of frequencies your opponents are playing their hands, and then how you can exploit those frequencies. So if you see a player who ends up folding too often to a 3-bet, the 2016 question is, how do I exploit that? Or if you see a player who folds too often to a C-bet, how do I exploit that? If he calls too often, how do I exploit that? The GTO solvers have gotten really good at giving us good answers in those sorts of situations, but it's still left up to us to try to figure out how to exploit those players. So it's not that the game's solved, it's more that we just have to be a lot more analytical about how we're playing, and think a lot more about frequencies as opposed to essentially playing our hand based on how we read our opponent, because we think he has a twitch and he might be bluffing. That sort of idea is pretty much off the table at this point in 2016. We're just looking a lot more at how he plays his overall distribution, how that affects how we should play our distribution. We're going to have different correct exploitive strategies based on how that distribution changes. And knowing all those different permutations is where the skill comes in as a poker player, because you're not going to be able to, it takes time to learn all of them. The breadth of material is very broad.
Holy shit, I'm going to have to go back and listen to that about 7 times and take notes at the same time so I can follow all that. So I want to get back to this GTO versus exploitive. So, and maybe, do you have a spot that you could sort of give us and talk about the two different approaches with this given spot?
Sure. The obvious spot that causes all the hand wringing with every player I coach, and myself sometimes as well, is the river. We have a strong hand on the river facing a really big bet. Terrence sent me this great picture of True Poker here.
Oh, nice.
With all these little icons in it. In honor of this picture, I'm going to use it for my hand.
Okay.
So in this situation, we have a pair of queens. We have the board's queen 8-7 3-2, and the club's missed, and the straight draw is missed, of course. And we have top pair good kicker. And we've bet a couple of streets now, and we've checked the river, and we're now facing a very large bet.
So you have one pair on the river, like ace queen, let's say, on the queen high board.
On a queen high board, and the draw's missed.
Super dry, yeah.
Yeah, super. Well, it wasn't dry in the beginning, but now it's it's pretty safe, but it's not perfect for us. And the guy bets 2x pot. This is the sort of situation where your stomach twists up if you're playing for a lot of money, and you can't quite figure out what you should do, because there's enough bluffs that miss that he could be bluffing enough. But we don't know that, and a lot of players never bluff. So we end up in a situation where if we're facing a player who never bluffs, we're going to lose this 2x pot bet every time. So every time we call, we're going to lose 2x pot. That's a pretty ugly situation. No one wants to lose 2x pot every time. But a GTO strategy is going to say we should call here. And we need to call here enough to make him indifferent. And it turns out the threshold's a little bit different than the day-to-day make your bluff break even, but it's definitely close to that. So we're going to need to gut up here and call here probably a third of the time with our top pair bluff catcher. And no one wants to lose the pot every time, a third of the time here. Lose 2x pot a third of the time.
So this is just the price to stop him from...
This is a situation where exploitively, you're going to find a lot of players who are going to be willing to overfold, and where GTO strategy would dictate a call. And it's essentially a situation where, because if you have a strong exploitative read on the player, that you're going to be able to fold top pair, because you're gonna realize that you don't have to call that 2x pot bet, and you're gonna save your 2x pot, which is awesome. That's big money. And you're going to do it very reasonably. And it's a situation where a solver is going to dictate that you call a third of the time. And this isn't, and ultimately that's the wrong decision against some sorts of players in the player pool. So essentially, at this point in time, you have to make a decision about whether or not you can exploit this player. And then there's actually an ancillary decision that sneaks up on you. And that decision that sneaks up on you at this point is because we have HUDs. We keep great track of our opponent's statistics. I'm going to know if you fold the river that often.
Right.
If you always fold top pair in that situation, I'm going to know that. So, are you facing a situation where you pay off occasionally now to keep from being bluffed later? Or do you have a situation where you never pay off with the understanding that your opponent's never going to bluff you? And ultimately, that's where the skill in poker comes in, because there's really no correct answer there. A GTO strategy is going to perform very poorly against a player who never bluffs. But if we always fold against that player who never bluffs, then the player is going to start to bluff.
Right.
So we end up in a situation where now we've encouraged our opponent to play a better strategy, essentially. And so what the actual optimal strategy there for maximizing, as opposed from a game theory perspective, is to call some frequency between game theory optimal and always folding. And that's a much harder frequency to come up with. And it's the sort of situation where it requires a ton of judgment and really separates the men from the boys in a lot of ways. Because there's no clear-cut answer, and there's not going to be a clear-cut answer.
And you're never going to know if you're right.
And that's the other part. You're never going to know if you're right. Though over time, you're going to actually start to see this play out in your database. You'll start to see that you're actually losing more money than you used to in that spot. But at least in the short term, you're not going to see it.
And because it's non-quantifiable, right? Like, you can look at your data and go, "Oh, I'm losing less money here because I'm doing this," but you don't know how much less, and you don't know if you're anywhere close to correct.
Oh, that's definitely fair on the river. Though honestly, over large samples, I can look back and see how I performed on the river calling there with top pair in 2010. And I can pull that data out of my database. And if it's significantly different, then I know that something else is up, that the world's changed in some way.
I see.
So you can start to recognize these trends over periods of time. It's usually not actually the river play isn't as easy to notice because it happens so infrequently. It's actually the one that always got me was folding to pre-flop 4-bets. Is I play a strategy that's pretty close to break even against when you 4-bet bluff me. And I penciled it out, and I'm very comfortable with it, but I'd come across streaks of hands where I'd be overfolding during that time period. For whatever reason, I'd run a little bit cold at the table, and then you'd start to see opponents start to overbluff you in that situation. So they were really good at flipping that switch based on what my stat was there, whether or not that was profitable to 4-bet bluff me according to their HUD. So I found myself having to play situations where I had to be very cognizant of how I'd behaved over the hands that I'd played with them rather than how I behaved over a long period of time. And it's something that Greenstein notes in his book as well. This isn't really a new concept. When Barry Greenstein wrote A's on the River, I don't know what was that, 2006, he talks about being willing to call down a little bit more when you've been overfolding at a live table. And the same thing holds true online.
Yeah, it seems really interesting. There's it's fascinating to listen to you, and I'm sure you probably go into this stuff in depth at Run It Once. You've got some videos that talk about sort of abstract stuff like this.
Yes, for the most part, my videos are pretty abstract. Mostly hand reviews and pile solver stuff. So
cool.
And some just straight theory videos on some different concepts in poker. I've got an optimal bet sizing video that was made earlier this year that was really popular. A Miss C-Bet video that was also super popular. That basically just explored the mathematics of betting once our opponent's checked in position. So if he decided not to C-bet in position and he checks there, it's going to actually, and then he folds some percentage after he checks on the turn, that's going to actually affect the amount of hands we can call pre-flop. Because if he folds too often after checking, after missing the C-bet, then you're going to make more money than you should with your bluffs. So you can call more hands pre-flop.
Cool.
And that's something that's up on Run It Once.
Awesome. If you want to check out his videos, again, it's Tyler Forrester, Goggles Nose, over at Run It Once. No Limit Hold'em stuff. Thanks so much, Tyler, for joining us. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks, Ross. I hope you guys have an awesome, it's midnight here, so I hope you guys have an awesome early morning.
We will.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, guys.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
That was Tyler Forrester T. He reminds me of that quote that we talked earlier about that Connor said. He's obsessed. He sounds like he spent a ton of time thinking about, way more time than I have, about No Limit Hold'em. And he's...
Yeah, and in GTO strategy in particular.
Yeah.
But,
fun stuff.
But, of course, he thinks you're Ross.
He does. Let's go to the Adam report then. Let's do that.
Oh, okay.
Roscoe. Sure glad he's all right.
Listen, boy, you gotta pick your spots good. You gotta make hay while the sun shines. Hey, good. You dipstick!
It's time for a Roscoe report.
Back. Air horns, because it's your Ross. T, was that the good segue you thought I should do?
Yeah. I thought
was that the obvious one?
It was the obvious one. It was the GTO one.
It's the GTO one.
Oh, that was good.
All right, Ross is back playing the pokers.
Baby.
This is great. So you've given up the sports betting. It's over. It's done. It's finished.
I relapsed a little bit for UFC, but I won, so I don't regret it.
So it doesn't count. I love it.
No regret.
No regrets, baby. Live. That's the lifestyle. No regrets.
No regrets. You ever seen that tattoo?
I have not.
There's a guy who has no regrets tattooed and misspelled on his chest.
Oh. Wasn't photoshopped?
No.
Cool. All right. You are back playing. This is our local 125 PLO game down at the Edgewater Casino. It is a great game. Lots of action. Tons of people.
Nobody who listens to this show should come play it.
Nobody who listens in the Vancouver area should play because it's really tough.
Yeah, it's really tough.
All right. So,
but then truly they do rake it kind of ridiculously now.
It's a $10 rake. T, comments on a $10 rake in a 1-2 game?
When Ross told me about that, I was like, what is that? Was that a typo? Like, he sent it to me on Skype. Like, $10 rake that exists in this day and age. Like, it is not in Europe. I mean, yes, I'm going to get a bunch of Europeans and Australians talking about how they paid $97 per hand, and they rake it 25% unlimited. But you know what? We're not used to that shit in North America. And a 10% rake. Wow, I hope this game is good.
It is good. Yeah, when you think of rake and how much they charge in private games where they'll take much more than that because, of course, they bring in some recreational players, shall we say. Well, this game has a bunch of recreational players. It also has some good players. There are some tough spots, and there can be lineups where $10 is completely unbeatable. but that doesn't happen a ton of times. So anyway,
so here's the thing, right?
Yep.
Like, because you've got like, if the game is very soft, then of course it attracts good players, right? Like that's sort of the Darwinian nature of things. If you've got a lot of, if you've got a lot of zebras in the savannah, then there's more lions there because the lions like to eat zebras. So I mean, we've got, like some days it's going to be good and some days it's going to be not good, but it definitely puts into perspective, like, when we. Not to say that people's complaints about, PokerStars and stuff aren't justified, but, they're still really only ranking $3 over there.
Note to self, I have to go back and find the bookmark for the Botswanian zebra tiger webcam from the
Oh, yeah,
the pond. Remember that thing?
Yeah, just nature preserve, like 24 hours.
24-hour nature preserve, and you could see, like, death. Like once every little while you see like a fight to the death. Those are pretty cool. Anyway, I don't know why that made me think of it. Let's go to some hands that you played.
All right. So I got to the casino and I couldn't get in the PLO game, so I
You're on the wait list.
Started up a new table of 1-3 no limit.
Okay.
And I thought I played an interesting hand here, so I thought I'd tell you about it.
Is the rake $10 at no limit too?
No, it's still, they raised it there too, though.
5, I think.
No, they raised it to like 6 or 7.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, so it's a 1-3 hand.
Yeah.
You're dealt the ace-3 of clubs on the button.
Ace-3 of clubs on the button. I have 300 effective, I think.
Okay.
And it folds to me on the button. I raised to 10. The small blind folds, and a young guy in the big blind who I've never played with before, as I said, new table. Haven't been actually at the Edgewater for a little while, so
they're all new faces.
He 3-bets,
okay,
to 25. So I decided to peel. Got the suited ace, got position. This guy's trying to push me around.
Not going to happen. You're not going to take that.
Yeah. So there is a 3-5-6 board.
Well, first of all, let's talk about the call of the 3-bet tee. We're playing 300 deep here. You've made it open to 10. He's made it 25. I think we can call here.
I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, I don't think that's
I think it's 100% call. I mean, unless the reason you're folding is because you don't want to pay rake.
Are there any 4-bets? Are we 4-betting off in here?
I thought about it, but I've never met this guy before.
4-bet is not terrible, and certainly in like something like a tournament context where you can put stack pressure on people, I think a 4-bet would be reasonable. I probably prefer just calling here.
Yeah, it's. I mean, if I need to build a rapport with this guy before I cold 4-bet him.
Okay. Flop comes 3-5-6, 1 club, 2 spades. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have the bottom pairs and the backdoor flush draw, but more important to this flop is I called on the button.
Doesn't hit his range.
Yeah. So he leads up for 35, and I peel.
You call, yeah.
Uh-huh. So the turn is an 8 of club, completing some draws, but also giving me the backdoor flush draw. Now he leads for 45 into, I guess, a little bit over 100. So I perceive this as kind of weak, and also this as another card that smashes my range. So I decide to kind of click it back here to see if he actually has something to, like, if he has just 2 overcards. I could just kind of semi-bluff this, and this is a really scary board for him, I think. So I raised to 95. What do you think?
What do I think? Well, he bet 35, and then the 8 of clubs rolled off, and he bet 45 again. Typically, I don't think this is like ace-king here very often. I think this guy's got some sort of hand. Is he going to fold it is one of those questions where you kind of have to know the guy. T, what thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would raise. I definitely like raising here. I think raising.
I like
larger,
it better than calling.
Yeah, I think raising. Well, I mean, I like calling better than folding too. So, I think raising larger would probably be right.
Yeah.
I mean, 300 effective, like, so. I mean, I guess you could make it like 120, and I think probably shoving rivers, puts you in a position where you're shoving, I guess, 3/4 of the pot on the river. So I think the raise, raising a little bit more, because I think like. I have a really hard time thinking that somebody is just going to fold an overpair to a click back. But on the other hand, I guess if your plan is to raise small here just to try to get more money into the pot and then blast away on the river, then maybe it's not too bad. So I probably size it a little bit bigger.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I was hoping to hit the flush, but I also needed to...
Well, that should always be what you're playing.
Try and make the nuts.
Making the nut should always be the play.
So, again, it's 3, 5, 6, 1 club, 2 spades in the flop. The 8 of clubs rolls off in the turn, and the 6 rolls off on the river, 6 of diamonds, misses the flush draw and pairs the top card on the flop. And he checks that 6 river. You have the nut 2 pair, or the nut bottom 2 pair.
Yeah, nut bottom 2 pair. And
so he checks to you. So,
yeah, I mean, he called, and I assumed with a board pairing on the river, he's not folding the overpair that he was getting sticky with. I mean, I could make it tough and shove all in, but...
The problem with that, saying that, is because then you're saying, oh, he's putting you on 2 pair on the turn that got counterfeited on the river, right? So, but what 2 pair would you have on the turn without a 6?
No, not like necessarily.
Most of your 2 pairs have 6s in them, right?
Yeah.
T, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should shove the river here.
I think so too. Yeah.
I don't like checking back here. I think this sort of goes to what Tyler was saying a few minutes ago, is that a lot of people will overfold in these situations, even people who play well. I think that if you are in the situation and you're just sitting there with 2 10s, like, how excited are you? I mean, you could be sitting there with 2 kings or 2 aces. Like, it's kind of all the same hand. You clearly represented a set or a straight. And, if you have a set or a straight, I mean, you don't care. The river is effectively a blank for you. There's no reason to believe that hit him in any way. You made the small raise on the turn, which was so small that, like I said, it can't really get the overpair off the hand. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't understand the thought process in checking here. I mean, yeah, he might have king, queen of spades or something like that. You have showdown equity, certainly against some hands. Like, they're pretty much all flush draws, I guess. But I think that shoving the river should be the play here.
I think so, too.
Okay.
So what happens? So you check back?
Yes, I decided to check, and yeah, it doesn't seem very GTO now, but I looked smart because he had ace-king off.
Wow.
he had the ace of spades, but he had, I think, king of clubs.
I guess shoving would have worked too, because he would have.
He might have called.
He got sticky. Did not want to.
You can't really say you look that smart, because I can't say in this particular hand that checking is actually better than betting. Clearly, the best player actually was to bet like 40.
Right, exactly.
Get a hero call
where he locks you up.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it was a strange play. And
he's not good at poker.
Apparently not. And then he started straddling every hand. And,
okay. Well, that might be a giveaway. All right. So hand 2. Is this another no limit hold'em hand, or we move to the PLO game?
We've got 4 cards here.
Oh, we have 4 cards.
4 beautiful cards.
Awesome. So we've moved to
the great game of Pot Limit Omaha.
I want to ask you about buy-ins, T. I want to get your thoughts on this. So this game, we've talked about it a lot on this show because I've played a bunch. Ross has played a bunch in there. It's a 1-2-5 game with an unlimited buy-in, and
it's truly unlimited.
It is truly unlimited because people often sit down with 5,000.
I'm buying in for $1 million.
You're buying in for $1 million. I wonder what the biggest buy-in.
I'm folding every hand.
The problem is you're not allowed to have like 5K or 10K chips on the table. Right. I think the biggest chip you're allowed to have is 100.
Yeah.
So you're saying I need to get really good at stacking chips,
black chips. Obviously there's this situation where you want to have, and there's some very poor players in this game, you want to have a stack to play against these guys, but you also want to be comfortable with the stack depth. Pot Limit Omaha changes a lot when you play 500 big blinds deep from 100 big blinds. There's a lot of different considerations to make, so you've got to be comfortable playing super deep to buy in here, but you also want to buy in enough to... buying 200, the minimum buy-in is 200, and if a really bad player has, and again, it's your bankroll, there's all kinds of considerations, but Terrence, what do you think optimally should be sort of your buy-in range here for most players?
Well, I think you hit on most of it. It's basically how deep the bad players are, right? I mean, that's really the most like critical factor. Now, the main problem in these sort of things is like these dynamics tend to change during the course of things. So if you sit down, it could be the fact that you sit down at the table and like all the bad players are 1,500 deep and like all the pretty decent players are all like 300 deep, then you go 1,500 deep, but all of a sudden like the bad players spew it off to the good players, and now all of a sudden all the good players have money and all the bad players don't. And so that might force you to get into a situation where you just have to pick up from the table and leave, unfortunately.
Right.
Which does happen. So I mean, yeah, like there's no hard and fast rules of these things. I mean, I don't think, stack depth is an issue, and PLO is a game that plays very different, whether it's 100 big blinds deep or 500 big blinds deep. But we're still targeting the bad players. There's no reason to believe that the bad players are suddenly going to become really good at 500 big blinds deep. There's some guys who are really good at that. Like, they're not good short stack players. But they are much more skilled. These tend to be more feel players and more aggressive players and players that are kind of ballsy and willing to risk putting you in really tough spots. But I don't consider those bad players. Like, I consider those tricky players who just happen to not be good at playing short stack. So it really, to me, I mean, if there's fish at the table, buy in deeper, and if they're if it seems like the fish are relatively short stack, then you should definitely be short stack.
Yeah.
Also, relative position too, right? So if you're coming in and you've only got one empty seat at the table, and the guy on your left is the only guy with a lot of chips, you don't want to buy in deep, because obviously you don't want to be out of position when you're playing in big pots.
Yeah, but also bankroll considerations, like if you have...
Oh, of course, that's a given, yeah.
I'm comfortable buying in for 300 and just running it up, and then, I might play a big pot later, but it's, house money.
It's not house money, it's your money.
I realize that, but, it doesn't hurt as much.
It's psychologically. Okay, so let's move on to hand number 2. You're in middle position. You have $350 stack, and you are dealt the Queen, Jack 9 with some spades in there.
Yeah, well, it's single suited, but it was spades. So there's a straddle from this guy who's just going off.
Super crazy monkey tilt?
Yeah, he's on tilt, and then there's a limp from another lady who is just going off as well behind me.
You have awesome position.
Yeah, so, for now I do. But I limp behind her. I don't think there's value in me putting in a bunch of my stack here.
See, I disagree. I think that's a great hand to raise with.
Yeah.
For a bunch of reasons. First of all, you're super Queen, Jack 9. You're super coordinated with a lot of flops. You're not going to be able to represent 3 aces if an ace rolls off very often in this crowd. I get that, but I think a nice sort of pot building raise with this hand is something that I'd like to do. Terrence?
Yeah, but
I think I would raise with this hand. It's a very strong hand for sure. I agree.
It is a strong hand, but I see what you're saying. But I also like to I like to see a flop, and then I can easily get my stack in on a good flop with like a check.
That's
raise.
also true. I mean, there's certainly something to be said about making people make bigger mistakes later in the hand as opposed to smaller mistakes earlier in the hand.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but I guess one of the other things too, when I have sort of medium strength suited hands, is that I sometimes flush out, bad nut suited hands that wouldn't call sort of a $35 raise or $45 raise or something.
But
where the guy's going to call with like I don't know, ace 6. 9 deuce with the ace-6 of spades, and you have the Queen Jack of spades kind of thing.
Right. But there's also the dynamic in this game where the 2 people behind me are literally never folding.
That's fine.
And
you're not trying to win pre-flop.
I was also thinking about this scenario that ended up happening.
Okay, so you limp.
So I limp. 2 limps behind me. I'm in middle position. Gets around back to the straddler, who pots it, as usual.
Okay.
So he pots. Now the lady behind me cold calls. And now I have these 2 guys behind me, and I can get my whole stack in with a hand that is, I think, far ahead of their range most of the time.
Interesting. So you have 350. You have the straddle is 10, right? So you call the 10, and then You made it, and the guy made it 70, so 340, so 2. So you're 70 of your $340 stack to flat or shove there. Yeah, well, flatting seems bad. So, yeah, I don't know. Terrence, what are your thoughts there?
I don't, I think that equity-wise, you're doing fine here. Like, I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah,
I think,
because
like
there's
you said,
dead
you are
money.
well ahead of the ranges, and so equity-wise, I think it's fine shove. I just sort of, I don't know if I see some inconsistency in the logic sort of I didn't want to raise the first time because I didn't want to sort of build this pot, but now we're shipping in and playing for stacks. It sort of can be both, right? So if the idea was sort of see flops cheaply and wait for them to blast off on flops that are great for us, where we have a 75-25 or 70-30 edge, then the situation, this edge that we have is probably very small against their range. It's maybe like a 55-45 against their range. So
with little
I'm just
fold
not
equity.
sure if it's consistent. And it's not that I don't like the play. I just don't know if it's consistent with your thought process.
Well, we're short stacking, right? And we're short stacking this game when these two people have 5,000, other people have 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, and short stacking. Of course, you're going to pick up equity pre if you can shove and get dead money in there and have and realize your equity. Right?
Yeah, that's kind of my short stacking strategy is to not just call big raises and then fold flops.
Yeah,
it's either jam it in or see a flop for cheap and then try and jam it in.
Okay, so you shove.
I don't know if that's GTO.
You shove over the 70.
I fall. Yeah, I shove. I think I got my entire stack in there. The other limpers fold, and the two crazy people call, as I kind of expected.
Okay.
And they both have like 5,000 behind. So
there's money behind.
There's money behind, for them.
So action on the side is great for us.
Right. Yeah. We get
because
protection.
This is a great situation because they can bet each other out of flops, and then you just hit back.
And they were very unhappy that I shoved.
Of course.
They were like, I
hate short stackers when I got a deep stack that do that. Of course.
And so the flop was pretty good. It was just a queen 10 deuce.
You fought the top set
with the
open ender.
With the open ender,
that's a pretty good flop.
And guy checked. The lady just kind of piled some chips in.
He fold.
Yeah. The guy folded. Then I won the pot. With the turn was a 5. River was a deuce.
You didn't see her hand. A lot of times they won't show.
I think she won a little side pot. I don't exactly remember what she had, though.
You won the pot.
She had, basically nothing. Maybe a pair of 10s. And so I won that pot.
Okay.
But I thought it was kind of an interesting pre-flop scenario. And then I went on a bit of a tear over the next couple hours, mostly against this lady who... every time she lost a pot, she would just pull out a stack of money and rebuy whatever she just lost because she didn't like to see the money leave her stack.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
So there was a lot of her money on the table.
Okay.
And I doubled up through her
several times,
at least twice, where I got played aggressively with the nut flush draw. She called me down with a non-nut flush draw, and we both made a flush, and she called it off again. And so in this third hand, I'm up to about 4.5 thousand.
So you've run 200 into 4,500.
300.
300 into 4,500. Okay.
45, and then.
So you're actually putting chips in. You have your chips in a tray.
So I have my chips. Yeah, I'm about to leave, and I'm actually texting Terrence like, "Oh my god, I'm playing in this game. I'm doing quite well. I think I should leave now before I play a large pot."
And in Vegas, you can, and I think even in LA too, if I remember correctly, you can have chips in a tray. You can put your chips in a tray and play with them.
Lyman talks about that in LA. People do it all the time.
Yeah. But in Canada,
generally considered annoying, but yes,
right,
people do it.
And you can't do it here, but you can do it if you're leaving. Like, I'm leaving in 2 hands, I'm going to rack up.
Yeah.
But the problem, of course, becomes you're telling everybody you're leaving, and people are going to play differently against you when they know that you're leaving, especially when you've run 300.
But that assumes they're going to make the correct correction.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying you have to be aware of it.
Yeah, you have to be aware of it. Right. I trust Ross's ability to like outsmart like second level other people who just see the fact that he's leaving.
Okay.
Big deal.
Okay.
Yeah. So I get ace jack jack 6 double suited. I'm basically playing until the big blind hits me. I'm like 4 or 5 hands away. And so there's a raise 2 to my right to 15, a call, I call. So there's one call behind, and the aforementioned crazy lady decides to pot on the button, and everybody calls, so I call.
She's playing, at least she's got you covered.
She's got all the money now.
Okay.
She won. I think she stacked like a couple other people. There's way too much money on this 1-2 table.
Okay.
Pretty
easy call.
The pot's 450, and the flop is 7-4-4 with 2 spades. So I have the ace jack of spades. Ace jack jack 6 is my hand. 7-4-4 is the board.
Okay.
Now, I'm not too stoked on the way I played this hand, but I'm getting back in the groove of things. So,
okay.
I'm also not stoked because
you want to leave.
I was about to leave. So everybody checks back to her, and she bets 300 into 450.
Okay.
Now the 2 guys on my right fold, and there's an old guy on my left, and I've been watching him for a couple of hours, and it's pretty apparent that he's preloading his hand to fold.
Okay.
So I think I can isolate this lady. Well, I don't necessarily want to isolate. I kind of want to take it down right here and leave the casino. So I decide to raise her because, she's just wild. She's playing like 99% VPIP. And so I decide to raise to 680
so
here.
Let's talk about this. You're taking a very medium strength hand.
But it's against this lady's like super wide range.
But she's going to be putting you. She's going to put you in some horrible spots here when you're out of position and you check raise her and she calls. Like there's a bunch of turns that are going to roll.
Yeah, but
out.
She's not thinking on that level. She's thinking my cards, this board.
Okay, but that still doesn't. I'm not saying she's even thinking on that level. She's going to...
Right.
It's just the fact that she still has a hand and 5,000 behind in the turn, and a whole bunch of cards are going to come off.
The fact that she has a hand and you actually don't.
Right. Well, he's got some... He does have something.
He's got some hand, but yeah, he's got a flush draw and a
bad overpair.
Right.
So,
well,
I think
there's a little history here where there was another... Previously, there was a 6-3-3 board, and... she had a non-nut flush draw and a gutter, and she went nuts on me when I had an overpair and a nut flush draw, and I called her down, and I won with the bear overpair.
Yeah.
And
okay.
So it's apparent that she, could be doing this with 5-6.
So what I'm saying
5, 6, 8
is you're taking some really high variance lines
right
against a player that you probably don't need to take super high variance lines against.
Right.
That's my problem with I think the check raise and the flop is really, really bad. I don't think that's a winning play by any stretch of the imagination. I think calling is completely reasonable here with your hand and your draw, and reevaluate on the turn. So I think folding's out, but I think calling is clearly the best play here for me. Terrence?
Yeah, I almost think that raising would be better if you didn't have a flush draw.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that you were just making a play at the pot, and you're just like, okay, well, I'm making a play at the pot. Well, with the equity of your flush draw, which is a non-nut draw because the board is paired, I definitely prefer calling.
Right.
Okay, so you check raise, and I'm guessing you raise to 680, it says?
Yeah, also probably not a GTO raise size.
Right, you're basically clicking back again.
Yeah.
To a girl who loves to gamble. Okay, so she tanks and she calls.
Yeah. Now the turn is the king of clubs. There's 18-10 in the pot, and I don't like the king, and I don't like the spot that I'm in right now, and I think, and I check to her, and she ponders and puts out 9 black chips.
So when you check raise a paired board, you're obviously repping, a big hand here, and the king rolls off, and now you check again. Like, You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the problem with that.
Right.
When you give up here on the turn.
Oh, yeah. I was unhappy when she called, but...
Okay. So the king rolls off, you check, and she bets 900 into 1800.
Yeah.
I think I'm folding here. I don't know.
I think I'm folding, and I think probably had I taken this line, I think I would actually be betting.
Yeah, on the turn.
You know, this is the thing. Like, we have, you know, like, I don't know whether she's going to fold aces or not. I have no fucking idea. And I don't know what her likelihood of having aces or kings here is. But there's a pretty good chance that even though she's insane, she's folding all the pairs, but, you know, like, you know, lower than that. It's pretty unlikely that she has a 4, given that she's 3-bet, like, pre. I mean, I know she's insane, but there's that. And... you know, you said that she tanked on the flop, which means it's a little less likely, again, that she has a 4, unless you think she was Hollywooding with, like, just the nuts. Mm-hmm. So, having taken this line, I probably actually just bet the turn, and then I think I fold once I check.
Right.
So she bets 900.
Yeah, so she bets, and I think that I can, you know, I still think my flush draw is live based on our past history and her playing every hand. So I decided to peel again. The river is an 8 of clubs. I check again, and she checks back, and she has the queen 8 4 deuce.
Queen 8 4 deuce. So she flopped 3 4s.
Yeah.
But she 3-bet to 90 with the queen 8 4 deuce, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Good game. I'm telling you, it's a good game.
It's fun, but I was unhappy with that. And then the next hand, I got ace king king 10, and I went for the back 4-bet again against the same lady and got called in like 5 spots. And the flop came like jack 10-7, and I had to check fold.
Yeah, interesting. I forgot last time we talked about this, and T, I want to get your... I played a hand in this game that I think I butchered pretty badly, and I want to get your take on it. So what happens is it's a game that 6 or 7 people are seeing most flops for a small raise or a limp. A guy limps under the gun, guy limps under the gun, another guy limps. I limp with the ace 5-5-4 with nut clubs, just trying to get in for, 5, and if I get in for 5, we're going to and flop something big. Otherwise, I'm not really going to get too involved. It goes around to the button who makes it... I think the button's... Actually, I'm in later position. So it goes to the button, he makes it 40, and 4 or 5 people call, and it comes back to me, so I call. Flop comes... ace 9-5. No, I have ace 5-4-4. Comes ace 9-5.
Ace 5-4-4.
Ace 5-4-4.
So you do not have a set.
Don't have a set. I have top and bottom. So it goes. It goes bet. The guy under the gun bets into the preflop raiser, and the preflop raiser was actually pretty tight. He wasn't a guy who was just out there all the time. So I gave him a little bit of respect for the raise. Guy bets into everybody, and so I think immediately he's got like a 5, 6, 7, 8 type hand. I think he's got some sort of. I don't think he's betting into 3 aces when the ace comes, right? So I instantly give him some sort of drawing hand. So I call to see what this guy's going to do on the flop behind me, and the pre-flop raiser behind me folds. So it's just the two of us now to the turn. The turn is a 9, so it's now ace 9-9-5, and he bets again. And now I'm completely confused by this hand. I know he doesn't have like 9-5. He wouldn't play it like this. I don't think he has ace 9. He probably wouldn't play it like this either. I still got him on this draw. And
Can I ask why you don't think he would play ace 9 this way?
Because I don't think he bets the flop. I think he check raises the flop with ace 9 or does plays the hand different. I don't think he leads out on the ace 9-5 dry board.
That's interesting because, I mean, I think the default play is to not, but I mean, I can sort of put myself, I like to sort of think about what the fish are maybe thinking about, or thinking about what some people think about in these situations. Is a lot of the time, like, they're worried that by check raising the pre-flop raiser, they're making the pot too big, I guess, with just top 2 pair.
Right.
Or something like that. And I know that makes absolutely no sense because leading out often does the exact same thing because you get back raised and then you like don't know what to do. But I definitely wouldn't. I don't feel confident ruling ace-9 out of my range, out of his range, except for the fact, of course, that you're blocking an ace, which helps a little.
I'm blocking an ace, and I don't rule it completely out. Obviously, it's some small part of, or some part of his range, but I think a much bigger part of his range is these wrap hands. So it comes again 9 on the turn. So ace-9 on 5. He bets. I call to see what he's going to do in the river. The river is like a king, and he checks, and I check behind, thinking I beat all his bluffs, and he's got ace-6.
Yeah, I was
so
going to say you don't beat all. Like,
he rolls over ace-6, and I'm like, oh god, I want to puke. Like, oh, what the. Like I
think folding the turn is the play there, just because of you've already obviously been counterfeited, and so you therefore lose to all the ace-x hands.
Yeah, and
you don't really have any sort of draw in any sense. I mean, you have your full house draws, but they're not really strong.
They're knotted, yeah.
They're not really strong. They're not very much equity. So I think I would have just kind of said this doesn't make like there are definitely situations where I'm like this doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to fold anyway because I don't really know what's going on here and I don't have a very good hand. So I think I would have folded the turn. I think checking back the river is probably fine.
Really? I felt like I should bet the river when he checks to me.
But if your read is right, then you had a wrap. Would you beat that anyway? So you can't have it sort of both ways and say I'm going to call the turn because I think he's a wrap, and then I'm going to check back the river because I want to get him off of a better ace, right? That kind of doesn't make sense.
I mean, I guess a lot of it, some of his ranges ace-6, 7, 8. The hands that I lose to that he has a wrap and a top pair, or some sort of weird ace-king hand that he played where he. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. Interesting. I guess I butchered it in a couple places, but so we're over. We're trying to keep to a couple hours, right, T? And we've gone a couple hours, and we still have a ton.
Remember when we were doing these shorter shows more frequently?
I know. But, and now we've done all this stuff, but we haven't done any of our mailbag, and we got a ton of mail. We could
let's definitely do mailbag sometime in the next few days.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Why don't we do a mailbag show? Today's Wednesday. Absolutely. Maybe Friday we'll do a mailbag show.
Definitely, and we'll see. Maybe the Poker News will hit us up with something unexpected
we could talk about
between now.
Yeah.
And you can always send us more email. Send us stuff to chatter about on the forums or on Twitter. We'll talk about it on the show.
Pokercast at 2plus2.com. Thanks so much, Terrence. Getting up early? What time is it over there?
No, it's 4 in the afternoon.
It's 4 in the afternoon. It's bedtime.
It's nap time. It's not time. It's bedtime for you guys.
Yeah,
you guys are almost. You guys must be almost into Thursday now.
It is Thursday.
To catch up to Asia. Way to catch up to Asia.
That's right. We're
really
there.
Nice.
Thanks to Roscoe for coming out to the suburbs. Really appreciate it. Tyler Forrester from RunItOnce.com for joining us and making my head spin with No Limit Hold'em stuff. It was fantastic. I appreciated that a lot. And thanks to you out there for listening in each week. Really appreciate it. Head on over to the forum, chime in, send us an email, send us a tweet, send us a voicemail. What's the voicemail number, Roscoe?
Oh, I don't know it off the top of my head.
What?
Right now.
Got a lot of 9s in it. We know that.
There's and a 702 for sure.
Boom! I got it. 702-799-9949. I got to Ross's Twitter faster than Ross got to his Twitter.
Give us a voicemail on the old Ian voicemail line, and we will talk to you later this week.